morning. Let me say that a little louder. Good morning. It's another Monday. It's Monday, January 27th, 2020. It is 38 degrees, on its way to 45 today. Broken clouds. We'll come back with the weather in just a little bit. It is Monday, January 27th, 2020. The headlines this morning, well, most of you already know the big one. A sad story. A chopper crash has killed basketball legend. Lost my place here. Pardon me. Basketball legend Kobe Bryant and his 13-year-old daughter. People aren't really sure what caused the crash yet. It could have been fog. It could have been something else. The coronavirus. 4 people in New York are being tested for the virus as China races to contain the growing outbreak. A community is shocked here in Newburgh as a family is slain. A defendant is convicted in a sex trafficking ring case involving Hawthorne Cedar Knolls. And one story was music to our ears, at least anyway, today. Carranza, the superintendent of New York, the federal government is considering charges against him. And in basketball, it was a sad night last night at the Garden, the Knicks defeating the Nets. And we'll get to those stories in a minute. First, though, we do need to do the weather. As you know, the weather is brought to you by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, a top-rated campus of senior care. Visit uhgc.com. And they're located right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. I know I get it right. Let's get to that weather right now. It's 38, on its way to 45 today. Partly sunny to mostly cloudy with a few scattered flurries and rain sprinkles. But it's going to be 43, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. Now tonight, partly cloudy to mostly clear. Lows getting down around freezing. Some in the upper 20s, but that's north and quite north and west of the city. Tomorrow, a mixture of sun and clouds, breezy with wind northwest, out of the northwest, 10 to 20, highs around 40. Wednesday, mostly sunny skies. The high will be 39 degrees. The overnight low will be 23. Welcome to the program, and we'll get to the news now directly. First, welcome to Good Morning. I almost said Good Morning, Westchester, but that was an old program of mine. See how we're like robots sometimes? This is Radio Westchester. Mornings with Bob Marrone is the show. I am Bob Marrone. We're here each and every day from 6 to 10 o'clock, occasionally longer, sometimes shorter, but 6 to 10 is our main thrust. We are the radio station at the train station, Radio Westchester. You can listen to us live on radiowestchester.com. You can go to the radio app of MyTuner Radio and click on the Mornings with Bob Marrone or radiowestchester.com, and we will be there. We're on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Periscope, iTunes, and soon to be on Spotify. And this top of the hour is supported by the United Hebrew of New Rochelle, a top-rated campus of senior care. Aging Issues Management, their partners, Aging Issues Radio, the law firm of Payne and Kahn, and Plug-in Virtual Reality as well. Dominic's Fine Cigars. And this week, if all remains as planned, we definitely will be doing our show live from Dominic's Cigars on Friday as part of our Super Bowl coverage. And as most of you know by now, the saddest story is, of course, the top story today, and that is the loss of Kobe Bryant, 20-year NBA superstar. He and his 13-year-old daughter were killed alongside 7 others in a fiery helicopter crash early Sunday in the fog-blanketed hills of Southern California. Bryant, who retired in 2016 after leading the Lakers to 5 NBA championships and garnering All-Star Game selections in 18 of his 20 seasons, was only 41 years old. Brian and the second of his 4 daughters, Gianna, were headed to practice at his Mamba Academy in Thousand Oaks when tragedy struck. His private Sikorsky S-76B helicopter plummeted at around 10 a.m. local time, crashing in the steep, brush-strewn hills of Calabasas, just 30 miles outside the city, where he spent his entire career. The crash sparked a stubborn quarter-acre bushfire in the remote terrain, fed by magnesium, presumably from the splintered chopper, with which dozens of emergency responders had to contend as they neared the crash site. The coroner has said that they've removed some remains, although not all of the remains. That may take a few days because of the nature of the crash and the difficulty of accessing parts of the site. Just a very sad story. So once again, as we know more about the Kobe Bryant crash, we'll let you know. The NTSB did arrive, the National Transportation Safety Board, excuse me, did arrive last night and have started their review. Now, I must say, for those of us who follow aviation, this is a strange one in that, yes, there was fog. Indeed, we know that the local helicopter functions in Los Angeles were suspended yesterday morning because of fog. So we don't know if fog was a factor. Many people suspect that, although most of sophisticated aviation today has the kind of equipment where you don't necessarily need to see where you're going. That particular helicopter had a ground proximity warning system, forward-looking, at least with what research we did last night, so you could see a mountain coming. So we don't know, or hill. We really don't know at this point. Now, something that we probably aren't saying enough, and the saddest part of it was the loss, in many ways, of his 13-year-old daughter, Gianna. She was someone who was very interested in basketball, very involved with her dad and basketball, and she lost her life at the age of 13, was really wanted very much a WNBA career. It is 6:28. Now, some of the others who passed on the plane, one being John Altobelli. He coached, for example, the Yankees' Aaron Judge and the Mets' Jeff McNeil in the Cape Cod League back in 2012. He, according to several reports, this man's name again, John Altobelli, the head baseball coach at Orange Coast College in Costa Mesa, California, for over 2 decades. He also served as the head coach for 3 seasons for the Brewster Whitecaps in the Cape Cod League. For those of you who don't know what that league is, it's probably the greatest semi-pro league in the world where graduating college players, minor pros, it is where the best who are not playing professional baseball gather each summer. And as we know more about some of the other people who lost their lives in this crash, we will keep you informed. And we'll be talking about that, obviously, with our sports people a little later. We do know, go back to the local news. An 84-year-old man is recovering at Burke Rehabilitation Hospital in White Plains after an alleged hit and run in Scarsdale last month. Aaron Kessler, the man who says he was the victim of a hit and run, said he was struck by a driver while crossing an intersection on Scarsdale and Lakeview Avenues, fracturing his hip. Kessler's lawyer, John Tengretti, said that Kessler remembers a middle-aged female driver with dirty blonde hair driving a dark SUV that struck him. How many blondes, female drivers with SUVs with dirty blonde hair with dark SUVs are in Westchester? 10,000? He alleges she got out of the car and brought him to the side of the road, telling him the car wasn't hers and that she was going to walk back to the car to get insurance information for him. She allegedly drove away instead. Tengretti said that Kessler did not go to the hospital until the day after the accident. At the hospital, he underwent surgery, and now he is in rehab. The lawyer told News 12, who gave us the story, that the town of Eastchester, the police department there, has been investigating the alleged hit and run, but has not identified any suspects. This story is pregnant with the word alleged all over it, kind of almost as if they're dubious about the allegations. So we shall see. Health officials in New York have 4 more people under investigation for the novel coronavirus. They are in isolation as their cases are being tested at the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. This in Aloha today. So far, 1 has been proven negative and 3 are pending, according to Governor Andrew Cuomo. The ages, locations, and other details about the people weren't immediately available. The cases under investigation in New York come as the coronavirus death toll in China rose and infections spread around the world, including 2 confirmed cases so far in the U.S. What's interesting, a report earlier this morning out of Hong Kong says that more and more what they described as draconian steps are being taken to isolate the virus, but that they do believe that now it will go worldwide. Again, that is not to cause any panic. It just may be one of those viruses that's about to make the rounds. Once again, we will keep you informed as we move through the news today and in future days. It is 6:32. Geez, I'm looking at my phone log. I wonder who called at 1 o'clock in the morning. Neighbors are shocked following the shooting that left members of a Newburgh family dead. This yesterday, police say 3 people, including a child, are dead after being fatally shot in their home. This in News 12. Officials say a person of interest has been taken into custody for interviewing. They say this person knew the victims and that this was not a random act. Police say they are conducting multiple search warrants across the area. Route 300 was closed off at Route 32 and Chapel Road indefinitely while police investigate. Again, community shocked by those slayings in Newburgh. Meanwhile, this out of News 12 this morning, the last defendant in a sex trafficking ring that investigators say exploited young girls in the foster care system. Boy, these people should burn in hell. A federal jury found Hubert DePigney, 36, guilty of recruiting girls and then sexually exploiting them for money. The ring is accused of exploiting 9 from the Hawthorne Cedar Knolls in Westchester. DePigney could face life in prison when he's sentenced in May. And what about, and this is commentary, not news at the moment, what about the people that run Hawthorne Cedar Knolls? This happened evidently under their noses. A former manager of the New York Renaissance Fair broke her silence by accusing her former bosses of turning a blind eye to sexual harassment. This in News 12 this morning. News 12's Tara Rosenblum investigated the Renaissance Fair back in September following allegations of worker mistreatment at the popular event. Claire Bochenek, a former performer and manager, took News 12 behind the curtain and went on to talk about after she received the royal treatment from her bosses. She claims her working conditions quickly deteriorated after she started to complain about alleged safety concerns that including missing bathroom breaks and unruly performers. And she said people who complained were fired at times. Police discovered the body of an 18-year-old, one Wilson Atz, it's ATZ, on Sunday, ending the search for the teen who had been missing since December 20th. This in Lohud today. Over 80 volunteers were out with the Suffern Police Department and New York State Police searching the area for Atz. Suffern Police said in a statement on Facebook. The New York State Police, the staties, are leading the investigation, which is ongoing at this time. Wilson Atz was 18 years old. All right, I have to admit I enjoy this story. You're not supposed to say it, just deliver the news cold, but I may as well be frank, but I'll give it straight. This out of the Post and other outlets this morning. The federal government has started looking into allegations of widespread academic fraud in New York City schools. City Councilman Robert Holden met this month with officials in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of New York after his call for a federal probe of deep-rooted fraud in the city Department of Education. And he went on to say, quote, I'm encouraged by my meeting with the U.S. Attorney. His team is taking this seriously. FBI agents have already contacted several whistleblowing teachers whose names he provided. Holden said he told the federal officials that Mayor de Blasio and schools chancellor Richard Carranza showed little interest in the matter. We're going to ask Bob Cox at 9 o'clock his take on this, although he will be going over some information not related to this, but related to the rules that should be applied and the standards applied to local school districts at 9 o'clock. Today, it is 6:36. The race for the position of Westchester's top prosecutor is expected to be one of the most intriguing contests this June. I agree, and that's the way News 12 put it. Current District Attorney Anthony Scarpino will go head-to-head with federal prosecutor Mimi Rocah. Long before the voters have their say, party insiders will have the first shot at deciding at next week's county Democratic convention. Both candidates describe themselves as progressive, but it's clear their approach to the job would be different. Scarpino has spent 4 decades in the public eye, including time as an FBI agent and a judge. He says he will be running on his record, which includes overseeing a drop in crime over his tenure. Rocah is making her first foray into politics. And she said, quote, what I've been doing is not making promises, but telling people a version of how I would run the office. And she was on People Before Politics Radio last night with our colleague A.J. Woodson, and he was kind enough to ask us for some questions that we believe should be asked. And one of them was, is she running to pursue a more left-wing agenda? And if so, is the role of a prosecutor to prosecute the laws as they're on the books or prosecute the laws in accordance with, if indeed she's running to be left of Mr. Scarpino? Is she doing it, or is one doing it, or should one be doing it to prosecute the laws within the context of a political agenda? And we shall see as we go forward. And I want to do this one more story before we move on to the local news. And this is I guess you could say a local story with a regional twist. And when I say local news, I mean a regional twist. 2 surgeon whistleblowers say that at least 5 patients have perished, including one who bled to death at Brooklyn's SUNY Downstate Medical Center amid poor care and negligent boozing doctors. This in the Daily News yesterday. A transplant surgeon abandoned a patient on the operating table and then couldn't be reached when the patient's condition went south. When the backup surgeon failed at the operation, Wren says he and fellow whistleblower Dr. Rayner, who were both out of town, had to fly back to Brooklyn to save the patient. The transplant surgeon, Nabil Samrani, also allegedly had an inappropriate relationship with a hospital pharmacist. Who cares about that? But anyway, the point being that the hospital is apparently, according to these complainants and whistleblowers, not run very well. We have regional news and more national news for you coming up in just a couple of minutes. Now, one of the things that we need to share with you, breaking last night, and you'll be hearing about it, more about it this morning on national broadcasts. Former ambassador and just recently former national security advisor John Bolton has written a book. The draft of the book, The Galleys Are Now Out, and he asserts in that book, according to reports from various news services, that the president did indeed make it a quid pro quo. That is, investigate Joe Biden, or you won't get your money. So that just about eliminates the conversation that nothing happened. But of course, it doesn't eliminate the conversation at all as to whether or not the president should be removed from office, or even if that's a crime. Again, a crime not being the threshold to remove a president from office. We already know that in the Clinton case, he was guilty of perjury, but it was deemed that it wasn't enough to remove him from office. So one step further in clarification of what happened, but it probably will not change the outcome. We're going to share the weather with you again because that's what we do every 15 or 30 minutes later on in the program, but in this first hour, every 15. It is 38 degrees. We're going to reach a high of 45 today. It'll be mostly sunny to mostly cloudy with a few scattered flurries and rain sprinkles, but nothing that will impact your day much. Now tonight, partly cloudy to mostly clear with lows around 31 degrees, some upper 20s north and west. Tuesday, a mixture of sun and clouds, breezy with winds out of the northwest 10 to 20 miles an hour, highs around 40 degrees. Tuesday night, mainly clear with lows around 26. Did I get that right? Yeah, lows around 26. Tomorrow, mostly sunny. The high will be 39 degrees. The overnight low, 23. The weather, of course, is brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. And the bottom of the hour is supported by Aging Issues Management. Their partners, Aging Issues Radio, the law firm of Payne and Kahn, Plug-in Virtual Reality, and Dominic's Cigars. We return to the news, and I'm looking, I get this one report, this aggregator, and literally about 15 stories are all related to Kobe Bryant. In fact, he was headed to, I think as we reported earlier, headed to his Mamba Sports Academy when the plane crashed, helicopter crashed. Now, he had long loved flying his own chopper. I did not know this. The future NBA Hall of Famer used his own helicopter to get to Los Angeles Lakers home games during his playing days, and once used one to ferry teammate Steve Blake to a doctor's appointment. This was a story even going back to 2012. And wow, again, the saddest story here in some ways because of her age and what all that lay before her was the death of his daughter, Gianna Bryant. She was following in her father's footsteps on the hardwood before dying with him in the crash. And just as someone, I see we have a call and we'll get to that, just as someone who has children and grandchildren, this doesn't make it any easier, but the fact that they died together, if there's a hereafter, well, at least hopefully she was in his arms. That just crushed me, the little girl dying. Of course, a 41-year-old man who had everything to live for and by all accounts was such a decent human being. You got to feel for him as well, of course, but this 13-year-old girl with life ahead of her. Just a sad, sad story. We have more news, but I see we have a caller, and we'll take that, or we'll go to that caller. We'll use our special system because we know who you are. There we are. We're ringing it, and they will answer. Good morning. You're on Radio Westchester.
Good morning, Bob. It's Tom.
Good morning, Thomas. How are you, sir?
I'm okay. Yesterday was a very sad day, obviously.
Wasn't it?
Anybody who follows sports, or even if you don't, I was, I had informed you. I don't think you were aware until you received my text, but I was watching golf on CBS. Started at 3:00, and I paused for a minute to mute the TV because I had to do something, and I looked up briefly. And you never want to see your name and your photo with the current year after a dash.
Nope.
And I saw Kobe Bryant, and all I saw was 2020. And I immediately Googled his name, and it came up. And I was like, oh, my God.
Yeah, it's such a shame.
Just horrible. And then one of the initial reports, and I have to apologize to you because I texted you that as well.
No, but it made me start looking at the news right away. Yeah, that all four daughters or all four children died. Yes.
Right. I mean, it doesn't change the sadness of it. I'll tell you though, one thing. And Shaquille O'Neal, all of the people that know him and played with him and were close to him began to release statements. Michael Jordan released a statement that was very touching. As did Shaquille O'Neal. And one of the things that bothers me in these kind of tragedies that occur is that it's almost like the people who were on the plane that nobody knew of, their lives are minimized. And I appreciate you mentioned the baseball coach that was on the plane.
Yeah, yes.
But in none of the statements by any of the other people, except for the one which by Shaquille O'Neal, did anyone mention the other people who were lost. You know, that bothered me. It bothers me when it happens in every incident similar to this one.
You know, I'm glad you said that. Like, if you've been listening, I have mentioned the daughter 3 times. I raised a daughter, and I've been very involved in raising a grandson, and slightly less, but because she came along later, but my granddaughter as well. And that bothers me terrifically. 13 years old. Now, I'm not being macabre when I say, if someone told me the only solace I get, and you know how close I am with my grandson, is that if he was going to perish early in a crash, I would want to be with him, holding him, and going with him. And that's the only solace that I can think of for Kobe and this young girl, because I know they were very close.
Yeah.
And I just, people should write a little more. A 13-year-old girl with her whole life ahead of her. Now, Kobe lived a short life, by relatively speaking, 41. But what an extraordinary life. He accomplished a lot and got platitudes. But a 13-year-old girl is just busting my heart. I just hope that if they knew what was happening, that Kobe was holding her when it happened. I know I'm sounding mushy, but that's what my heart says.
Bob, you know, I'm sure they knew what was happening, because how many times, well, at least speaking for myself, that I'm on a plane.
Oh, sure.
And you hit an air pocket, and you kind of like do that little bump, and you start to think about, you know, what could be going on if the plane goes out of control. And I mean, that's the way I'm thinking, and that rush of nervousness that you get until everything settles down.
Yeah.
I'm sure they knew. I'm sure they knew.
Well, evidently, a lot of the people on this plane were involved in sports and were involved in Kobe's, I guess it's his Mamba program for athletics. And they were very accomplished sports people. There may have even been another daughter, another young person on the plane. Again, it's hard to piece together everything because they're not releasing many names until they can notify families. But I think her best friend, pardon me, his daughter's best friend, who was also on a basketball team with her, I believe that girl perished as well.
Yeah. You know, and there are so many little things. I just want to try to tick them off. I don't know how much time we have.
No, go ahead. This is I was going to open up the phones for this, so you led the charge. So anyone wants to call about the Kobe Bryant death, please go ahead.
Right. So what occurred yesterday? So I mentioned I was watching the golf, right? And so after I looked at the screen and I sent out a few texts, I put the volume back on, and I look up and Tiger Woods is standing on a green, and he's got this look on his face. And Jim Nance was crushed. Jim Nance was crushed when they had a little shot at him and Nick Faldo up in the tower. And Nance's voice was actually cracking at a certain time when he was talking, but they went down, they had a close-up of Tiger Woods, and on his face, it was just written all over it that something terrible. He was informed of something terrible. So they had Dottie Pepper, who's like an on-course reporter, say, yeah, Jim, Joe LaCava definitely knows. Joe LaCava is Tiger Woods' caddy. He's been Tiger Woods' caddy ever since the Australian caddy
got fired.
I forget his name. Yeah. And Joe LaCava was Freddie Couples' caddy for a long time. He was with him when Freddie Couples won the Masters back in '93. But anyway, so I called my son Nolan in, the Islander fan. I said, Nolan, come in here. And I said, look at this. Look at Tiger's face. I told him, I said, do you know what happened? And I told my son, being a 25-year-old and basketball sports fan, et cetera, he was very upset. But anyway, and it turned out that Tiger Woods did not know. We were led to believe he knew, and So at the end, they clarified it that Tiger Woods is going to be told, because Tiger Woods grew up a Lakers fan, grew up in California. Obviously, knew there was a great picture of him that they found when they were both like 17, 18 years old together. So young looking, and such a different looking Kobe Bryant, the young Kobe Bryant, right? But they told him, actually, the caddy told him as he was walking off the green and walking into the scorer's tent to finalize the score for the day. Another thing is, LeBron James passed Kobe Bryant for third place all-time scoring, NBA history, and he did it in Philadelphia. The game was played in Philadelphia. There's things where you connect the dots, and there's like how things happen, right, Bob? How things happen.
In fact, his last tweet was to LeBron the night before about
just so many things occur coincidentally that. How
Tom,
did this happen?
No, I know. One of the greatest lines in literature is "For whom the bell tolls," and then of course the next line is "It tolls for thee," because when people die, particularly when they die young, particularly when they appear to be larger than life, it's a reminder to everybody that nothing's guaranteed, not one single second, and it's just
Nor does money mean very much, right? I'm reading this is a approximate net worth $500 million. It doesn't really mean very much when your plane is going down, or if you have a severe illness. All that money is not going to help you. What is important? What is important today is Monday. What is important in our life today that we shouldn't overlook? Because there may not be a tomorrow.
Very true. And I think that's what shakes all of us, particularly those of us. I mean, middle-class folks have comfortable lives. Some people struggle. Others are upper middle class or even rich. But all the rest of us who are not rich and famous per se, there's this tendency to look on them as they've been blessed. Well, they're not blessed. They've done well, but they can go just like the rest of us. And I know I'm saying the obvious, but it's hard for us to accept that, Kobe Bryant, bigger than life. Kobe Bryants don't die. Yes, they do. O.J. Simpsons commit murder. I mean, people, it's just a funny world. Not a funny world. It's just the way life is. And it just, when this one hits, and again, when a man dies from one of the instruments of his wealth, I mean, that's Sikorsky helicopters, $13 million and $19 million. Seats 18 people. That's an airliner with a prop, with a rotator.
Another thing that I thought of yesterday a lot was, and it was within minutes of this happening, and hearing that there was fog and planes were grounded. The police helicopters.
Yeah, that was troubling.
Yeah, and it reminded me of when JFK Jr. perished with his wife and sister-in-law. On that day, there was a very low ceiling. I don't know what that means, in airplane
low
parlance.
Ceiling means that the fog is low in the ground too. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, but anyway, so he took off and went to where he was going. I guess Martha's Vineyard or something. But it was questionable whether an inexperienced pilot, and I'm making no assertion about the pilot on the helicopter for Kobe Bryant, but sometimes they wanted to get, maybe it was it's just touch and go. Maybe we shouldn't take off.
If I may, one of my second favorite hobby that I don't talk a lot about on the air because it's just not something a lot of people are into, but are airplanes. And in the case of John Kennedy, and I say this with all due respect to a bright young man, Kennedy was a victim of that old thing, character's fate is destiny. He had no business. Every single indicator that night, over water, in a fog, a plane that he wasn't used to, in a rush, having what we call go fever, all recipes for disaster. And he fell victim to something called spatial disorientation, because during dusk, over water, in haze, you can't tell the horizon, which everything that flying a plane with discipline is about. You can't tell the horizon from the sky. It's really, it was nuts to do it. So he, just the same way, and I know Yankee fans don't like it, of the great catcher, he was years away from flying a jet. much
Yeah.
less without a seatbelt. But having said that, this guy, Kobe hired professional pilots. He wasn't flying this thing himself. These guys were
Sure.
pros. Now, I'm just wondering if that particular Sikorsky, which is a pretty upgrade helicopter, if I did a little research. It has what's called a ground proximity warning system. And one is a forward-looking ground proximity warning system. I don't know if it has that. But if it did, it actually tells you when the terrain is building up. In other words, you could see the mountain on a graph, the hill on a graph. So if it didn't have that, then maybe he was a victim of the fog. If it did have that, well, you got to wonder. But your point is absolutely well taken. Should they have been taken off in the first place? Yeah.
Yeah, you go back to the why for doing that. That's where the human aspect comes in. He's got a 13-year-old daughter on the plane, another classmate or friend, the basketball on the team, and they go into a game. Maybe we shouldn't go, but if we don't fly, we're not going to get there. We're not going to get there on time. The whole thing about you never want to let your kids down. You do things sometimes that, if you're thinking more reasonably about it, you miss a game, it'll be a next game, right? But it's maybe the fathers didn't want to disappoint the daughters, and you know what? Let's give it a shot. Let's go and let's fly.
Well, there are interesting statistics about this. Very confident people sometimes make bad pilots or bad decisions because they don't think they're going to die. A, B, they're very comfortable in their skills or the skills of people that they hire. I mean, history's filled with this. I mean, JFK Jr., I'm sure thought, hey, I'm JFK Jr., I'm cool, Kobe Bryant, very confident man. Well, by the way, this is an admission now, it's 25 years ago, but did you ever take the driver's course because you had too many tickets? Well, I did.
Oh, no, I never did.
Yeah, I did. And one of the things they tell you is, do you know who's famous for getting lots of tickets? Doctors. Because they think they know better than everybody else. I can go 85. It's and that's no knock to confident people. But like I worked with a guy at Marrone. Guy was a gazillionaire, very successful trader, enough to buy his own small airliner, and he was on his way up to, I guess it was Maine or maybe New Hampshire for the holidays, and his plane went down. I mean, so this guy was 40. Rich, confident, very confident. I personally wasn't a fan of his. I won't mention his name because I won't speak unkindly of him, but he was brilliant. And 40 in his airplane, history. It happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Bob, one more thing and I'll let you go.
Sure, go ahead.
We were talking about money and, money is one thing, but life is another thing. So my wife, Anna, lost both her parents before she was 30.
Oh my!
Which is relatively young, and you don't not to have your parents around as you get older in your life. And I've lost mine now and miss them deeply. But my wife always would say that she always felt her mother was rich, and her parents in general rich, and it wasn't from being monetarily rich because they were immigrants from Italy, came over here while they were in their they're early in their lives, in their 20s, worked blue collar jobs and, lived in an apartment the whole life. But she said she always believed her parents were rich because of her family, the way the parents treated her sister and her, the way Sunday was a cherished day to have the family gather around and have dinner together. Money doesn't make you rich. It's you make yourself rich.
Absolutely true. I'm going to take another call. I see the call coming in, and I will call that number back. But before you go, it's funny you say that. I have to mention this. A family that I sometimes, they're political, so they're fair game, that I pick on a little bit, is Mike Spano being the youngest brother of the Spano family. I'll call him Fredo for laughs, but he's the mayor of, a very decent guy, by the way. He's the mayor of Yonkers. But they're a very powerful family, and they do things that powerful families do I often don't like. And I throw them under the bus, as any good news guy would. And Nick Spano, who was like the patriarch, who I also used to refer to as the Don, he called me up. He says, let's go to lunch. Why do you do this? I told him, but the real thing that came out of the lunch I had, I don't know if you know this about the Spanos. I came away from that lunch green with envy. They have one of the most wonderful families that you could imagine. 12 kids. The holidays are special. They all are close. They all love one another, and you could tell it was genuine. And so here I was sitting down at a political lunch, right, to talk about the family and why I did what I did, my form of humor. It was not angry at all, by the way. And I came away more than anything saying, wow, how wonderful it is to have a nice family, you know?
Bob, it was the same way, and then I'll let you go. It was
Okay.
the same way with Ralph Martinelli Jr.,
Yeah.
who passed away. The editor of the Westchester magazine, went in for routine surgery and lost his life a year later. Went into a coma. It was just an operation that something went wrong, and he came or is in a great family. The Martinelli family has so many brothers and family and cousins, and he was my sponsor for a golf club I joined about a decade ago, and always talking about the family, and I met a lot of them, and here he is, a man who had everything to live for, went in for surgery and never made it out. And just on that note, I just want to, it buttresses what you just said about the Spano family.
Yeah, it's just one of those things, totally separate from politics. Hey, Thomas, thank you for a very heartfelt call. Have a wonderful day.
You too, Bob. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, it is 7:02, but we keep our promises. We're going to get back to the caller who's been trying to get us and get him on the phone. And that's one of the reasons we do this. We can move around our breaks a little bit. All right, that's us calling him, I do believe. Yes. No, pick up. No, I called the wrong guy.
Hello?
Thomas, sorry about that. I called the wrong guy. I hit the wrong button. For all my genius. Here we go. See, I can't give these phone numbers out. Come on, pick up. He doesn't recognize the number. All right. He doesn't realize that that's our number. I will just say that the outgoing number when we call you is a 718 number, and we will leave it at that. It is time to read the weather again, and it's really just reading because you know how that is. It is 38 degrees, getting up to 45 today. But we'll have maybe a scattered flurry or two, nothing to write home about. Mostly sunny, only a 10% chance of rain. Tonight, partly cloudy, mostly clear with lows about 31. A mix of sun and clouds, breezy with wind out of the northwest, 10 to 20 miles an hour, highs around 40 degrees. And Wednesday, mostly sunny skies. The wind will be 39 degrees. The overnight low will be 23. And the weather, as always, is brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. And we're going to try once again before I go to the regional news. All right. We tried, okay? We tried twice, and we'll see now if he will call us back. I think I know who it is. I mentioned this story earlier about the school's chancellor. And again and again and again, and full disclosure, we've called him openly racist because of his overly aggressive position that everything seems to be racial and willing to compromise test scores, violence, and everything else to pursue his racial agenda. And did, at least in my estimation, demote particularly the school's chancellor here, superintendent here in New Rochelle, when she was in New York City, demote white people because they were white. And bias is bias, whether it's white on white, purple on green, Asian on white, or white on Asian, or whatever you hope to do. The founding fathers, and particularly Martin Luther King, who in a funny way, though delayed, I kind of include in that. And I don't think we do that enough. I don't think he would be happy with the way certain civil rights issues are being pursued, which is to demonize people because of the color of their skin. It's so antithetical to the great Martin Luther King. But one of the stories, and this is a woman, I keep saying I'm going to get her on, and I just haven't gotten around to doing it. We're going to take that call. We'll be right with you, caller. Carranza's failure, this is a post-opinion item, and Carol Markowitz, just a centrist through and through, smart, maybe center-right, smart woman. It's time for the New York City Schools Chancellor Richard Carranza to go. Actually, it was time for him to go last year when he was caught hiring a friend with a financial business with the Department of Education, or even earlier when he declared war against Asian American parents who objected to his anti-Asian school integration themes. But now that Carranza has directly insulted parents, he really needs to go. The last straw should have been Carranza storming out of a meeting with parents concerned about violence at their local middle school. This is a story I am so sick and tired about. Let's please, before the infection, just like the virus, what's going on in New York City schools is just like the coronavirus, except I call it the Carranza virus. And we've seen it infect our own school district here a little bit, and we push back, at least we do here, behind these microphones as energetically as we can to keep it from happening here, where tests won't matter, competence won't matter, your violent behavior won't matter, all depending on what color you are. Let's go to the telephone. Good morning. You're on Radio Westchester.
Hey, Bobby, it's Anthony. How are you?
Hey, Anthony, how are you? By the way, if you recognize that number, I can't give it out. That's
no, I recognize it.
Oh,
just
okay.
that I'm in the process of walking out the door for procedure, so I couldn't pick up the phone
understand.
at that particular moment.
So what's on your mind?
As someone who lost their father at the age of 39, and for someone who places the ultimate importance on the family,
yes.
You can screw everything else, as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say this to people. If your life ends in a second from now, I just pray that you're taking more memories with you than regrets you've left behind.
That's so true. He had to get that off his chest. So many people don't know that about Anthony. He is, in addition to being a well-prepared caller and frequent adversary of the host, one of the most sensitive people I know. I actually write some poetry and different things. And I wasn't surprised by his call at all. And for those of you just joining us at 7:07, and I've got some stories to tell and that we'll go over, but if you'd like to call about the Kobe Bryant death, because it has so many significant things to it. A man worth, at least by reports, $500 million, 41 accolades, great at what he did. Had his hiccups in life, but by all accounts, a wonderful family man now, committed to his 13-year-old daughter and his other children. There is so many ripples to this story that affect all of us because his fate is our fate too. We didn't have the life he had, although some of us would like to think we've gotten to do it all. But I'm looking at a picture of him and Gianna, and it's just heartbreaking. In fact, on the other side of this, and we have to go there because we do the news, and we need to out this, and we need to remind people who work in social services. We need to remind people who work in child protection services. We need to appeal to the better nature of the angels in all of us when dealing with this next story. So that, it's always going to happen. It's the human condition. But why would you do this? A Calais NYPD cop and his fiance, and many of you saw this over the weekend. It's hitting a lot of the pages today, and it was obscured by, of course, impeachment and the tragic death of Kobe Bryant and his daughter and those other people. But this guy, well, they're in a better place in hell. A Calais NYPD cop and his fiance crudely discussed his abused autistic son's imminent death inside a bitterly cold Long Island garage. The expletive-laced chat between transit police officer Michael Valva and Angela Polina included a recorded admission that the cop was suffocating helpless Valva, 8 years old, after the child repeatedly fell headfirst onto a frigid concrete floor inside the two-story house. This is out in the Mauritius. The tiny victim's body temperature plunged to 76 before his January 17 death in the home on Bittersweet Lane. Anyway, blah, 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 blah. But here's the point. Here's what he did. He tortured this kid, just like the case we saw recently here in Westchester, where a father was convicted. He tortured this little kid And there were two different people. They brought two different families together after previous divorces, I guess. And they just tortured this child. The depravity of these defendants is shocking, said a shaken prosecutor Zini after hearing the recorded conversation. They caused the death of this little boy. Listen to this, folks. A recording recovered from the home by investigators captured the two accused murderers cold-heartedly discussing him after the child is heard asking why another child, one of the other kids in the household, was heard asking why the boy couldn't walk. Paulina says, because he's hypothermic. He keeps face planting on the concrete, says Valva. You know why he's falling, says Paulina? Because he's cold, responds Valva. Boo effing who? Paulina then asked the cop what he was doing to Thomas, with Valva responding, I'm effing suffocating him. That's what I'm doing. Now, let's hope that he won't be let out on bail. I mean, that's a cheap shot by me. Of course, he's not going to be doing that. Boy, the heat is coming down, so rightfully so, on the Brooklyn Borough president for his comments. Even the Daily News, as you know, they skew left. It was harsh. Harry Siegel wrote a piece saying, "Get out of my city," blared the Daily News front page on Tuesday, along with a picture of Eric Adams. The Brooklyn Borough president, aiming to be our next mayor, made his first impression on a lot of New Yorkers with a few lines from his speech. Well, you know what? I should have realized it. He gave the speech at Al Sharpton's National Action Network. Now, many people have asked me, because I've been fortunate enough in a relatively short, but morning's now 13 years, overall radio 16, whatever it is. I've been relatively, very fortunate, not relatively, very fortunate to interview lots of what many would think of as famous and important people. And it's not a day I don't look at the TV and see somebody I've interviewed or read the papers, and I feel pretty lucky about it. And so people will ask me, have you ever interviewed Al Sharpton? Now, Al Sharpton's done some stuff since his heyday. When he ran for president, he did a pretty good job of it. And he's done some stuff that you could say, hey, that's not a bad idea. But I used to get calls from the National Action Network all the time, and I said, I will put him on when he apologizes for ruining the prosecutor's life, the DA's life up near Poughkeepsie, where the Tawana Brawley incident took place. And when he apologizes, then I'll put him on. Until he does, he's always just going to be a demagogue to me. So just if you're wondering why he's never been on and why I take a pock shot at him, you don't ruin people's lives. Although lots of politicians try and do it every day. But he went out of his way with a lie. It's one of the reasons why people like Kellyanne Conway disgust me to the degree that they do. Anyway, moving on. We have to one of these days open up a conversation about Vladimir Putin, but we'll let that work. This is very important, at least in the context of American life, of American Jewish life and the Jewish diaspora. And this is dated January 26, yesterday. Europe's Catholic bishops are marking the 75th anniversary. Imagine 75 years. Think of those films. In fact, I'm going to be trying to teach my grandson history. He's a pretty decent student. Not a great student. Doesn't work hard enough. That's what I added you, Ian. But he's a very bright guy, very thoughtful, has a lot of depth. Going to do very well in college. Anyway, he needs to learn some of this stuff. So if you're listening, Ian, Europe's Catholic bishops are marking the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz with a statement denouncing anti-Semitism and, quote, the manipulation of the truth for political aims. The statement was released on Saturday, also in a Hebrew version, 2 days ahead of the anniversary of the Soviet Army's liberation of the camp in Poland. That's today. January 27th, 1945 is the year. 1945. It comes amid a rise of Holocaust denial and other forms of historical whitewashing in a period of rising nationalism. Even some governments have sought to replace honest historical inquiry with mythologizing their nation's behavior during the war. The bishops did not single out any specific case of manipulation. Instead, they called for prayers and for candles to be lighted. Anyway, There are so many different movies you can watch. Go to Netflix, look at the Auschwitz film. Or go to the one that says Einsatzgruppen, about the different, and these are real films and videos. These aren't just movies. Or if you want to just see a movie, it was a great TV movie, 3 hours long, called Nuremberg with Alec Baldwin. And it's about the trials of the Nazi leaders. And one of the things in that movie, there's a segment in the middle of the movie. And this is for anyone you know, and you shove it in their faces if they deny the Holocaust, or for those you love who you want to equate or to introduce to the Holocaust. Because it's a wonderful movie with Baldwin, and it's about how we went, we and the English and the French and the Russians held the tribunals after the war. But almost in the middle of the film, maybe 2/3 through the film, they actually show the tapes that they showed at the trial. And it's something that you need to see. And there are several books as well, wonderful books out there that we'll be talking about when we do that podcast. Again, it's taken a lot of preparation. For example, how they would kill babies first, or rather kill the parent first so that the parent wouldn't have to see their child die, but how they kill both of them anyway, just shoot them. Sometimes to save bullets, they'd make them hold up the baby and shoot the baby and then have the bullet hit the mom as well, et cetera, et cetera. So anyone who denies the Holocaust, if you don't want to give them the list of books and movies, have them call me. I'll be glad to give it to them. Anyway, got that off my chest, and I'm glad I did. A lot of stuff. It is 7:17. We will be talking with Vince Russo in just a minute. Now, something I wish the president wouldn't do. All right? I really wish he wouldn't do this. He went out with this tweet the other day, and presidents cannot do this, should not do this. Now, is it impeachable? No, but it's just something that is out of another time when there were kings and et cetera. President Trump rallied or railed against Representative Adam Schiff on Twitter Sunday, suggesting he has, quote, not paid the price, unquote, for his role in the impeachment. Schiff later said he views the comment as a threat. Shifty Adam Schiff, this is a quote from the president, is a corrupt politician and probably a very sick man. He has not paid the price yet for what he has done to our country. The impeachment hoax is a massive election interference, the likes of which has never been seen before. In just 2 hours, the radical left, do-nothing Democrats have seen their phony case absolutely shredded. Excuse me. Shifty is now exposed for illegally making up my phone call and more. Schiff, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee that spearheaded the impeachment, was asked on NBC's Meet the Press if he saw the tweet as a threat. I think it's intended to be. This is a wrathful and vindictive president. I don't think there's any doubt about it. And if you think there's a look at the president's tweets about me, or if you think there is, look at the president's tweets about me, that I should pay a price. Interesting. Just interesting, depending on how you feel. Excuse me, my frog occasionally likes to be on there. I have one more story I want to share with you, and then we can move on. Well, things are falling into place right on time. We'll be talking with Vince in just a moment. There was, and this is one of the things that I mentioned the other day on the air, how the left has done to people that which it has always been critical of others, the right and others just in general of doing, not being forgiving, not giving people a second chance, or worse still, condemning someone, because of something that is untrue and letting it stick. And this has to do with a golf commentator, and I'm sure, and I hope he's still listening, Tom from Pelham, I'm sure knows about this. And this is the story of ESPN tennis analyst Doug Adler. And he is yet to have his name restored. There is now should he have thought about it probably, but there is a strategy in tennis, a style of play called guerrilla, where you attack the net. And he was complimenting Venus Williams for her successful guerrilla tactics. Well, someone went and wrote, someone who was half-assed and didn't look at the whole context of what it was, said that he called this tennis star who was African-American a guerrilla. And he was banned, blackballed, and now what they did, he sued, so they had to give him some money, and they had to more or less put him back on the team, but he doesn't get any gigs. And there's just something terribly wrong with that. And a lot of people, if you ask them, and it's out there, they say, he called her a gorilla. He did not. Just to get the record right, he did not. And my friends on the left, I've got to ask you, don't go condemning people forever. We just talked about a president who was vindictive. Well, the left is just as, if not more vindictive, whether it's the Me Too movement, where the Me Too movement needs to flourish. It needs to be what it is, with one exception. No one deserves to be banned for, even people who actually commit offenses, for life and forever. Otherwise, do away with your restorative justice, do away with your sensibilities about more lenient sentences for crimes from people who come from different backgrounds, how we need to be more loving and peace adoring. Just drop that hypocrisy then. All righty, it is 7:20. It just hit 7:21. It's time to talk with Vince Russo. We commiserate with him on a daily basis. Good morning, Vince.
Good morning, Bob. How are you today?
Oh, I just went through my usual. I try and piss off the right and the left before I get to guests. We got a few calls today about Kobe Bryant. Boy, what a reminder that for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee.
Yeah, it's a shame. Now, Mr. Bryant wasn't piloting the craft, right? He was just
no. He was rich enough to have pilots, $500 million. He had pilots. It was a big time helicopter. This is no small thing. It's seats like 18 people. It's turbine, a really major ship. And he's been dealing. We did a little research. He's been doing helicopters for years. He went to most of his games by helicopter. So.
Yeah, I know, because in the past there's been professional athletes who have been pilots and other dignitaries who were just in over their head and ended up losing their life over crashes and such like that. Thurman Munson and JFK Jr.
Well, both of them were when I say this with all due respect to them passing on, with respect to their flying, they were idiots.
Yeah,
they
were
brought it
way
on
in
themselves,
over
both of them. But again, a lot of it probably dealing from, hey, I'm JFK, I can't crash in a plane. God rest his soul. And same thing, Thurman, great ball player, but too confident. No, you can't will your way to flying a jet. It just doesn't, And he wasn't never seatbelt on right, and but it happens all the time in different walks of life. Look, well, the most interesting one of the greatest pilots. Everybody thinks of Chuck Yeager as the definitive pilot and definitive test pilot, but you know who Scott Crossfield was, right? He was the second. He was the what's the right word I'm looking for? He was a civilian. He wasn't an officer. He was the second greatest test pilot. In fact, as a test pilot, maybe even better than Yeager. He was piloting his own Cessna when he was 85 and made a mistake and died. It's but at least he was 85. It's just the way it is, V. I'll look at that senator.
Well, to your point, Bob, everybody is mourning Mr. Bryant's death, and that's because he's a famous person. But you know what? People die every day, and it's part of life. And unfortunately, when someone's as young as he was, it really is impactful.
Well, it's impactful. Plus, he had everything classic to live for: money, a wonderful family, a great reputation, and which is the point. That's why I use that line: "For whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee." We're really saying, "Oh my God, we go there too, don't we?"
Yeah.
I feel for his daughter, 13 years old.
I know. It's really a shame.
And he was taking her to a game.
Just on a side note.
Anywhere you want to go.
What I suggest, you were trying to call. I guess it was Anthony before. change the caller ID on that number and have it come up as the radio station.
Yeah, I know.
Differently, and I mean, I've seen it, but I'm saying to myself, only you would be calling me at this hour, so I answer it.
You're right. No, we realize that. It's something
But you need to change that caller ID.
Yeah, I understood. But
did you see the NHL All-Star and skills competition?
Yeah.
I missed the skills. I saw a little bit of it.
The kids. My grandson is capable of finding anything on YouTube, and so yeah, I saw it, but only days later.
You know what annoyed me though with the game itself? I watched.
I won't watch those games. It's.
The format that they have with the 3-on-3. They could actually play that game very seriously, the way they do in the NHL, because there's no hitting on 3-on-3.
Right.
And they could go after the puck hard. They can, back check and do all of that.
Well, you can rub a guy off. You just can't go to take him out because it'll kill you. If you miss, it's going to be 3-on-2.
Yeah. But even in that format, they just kind of lazed around, and it's such a waste of time. I don't even know why they bother.
Well, you know what? They should just do the skills competition and then let the girls slit one another's throats in a real game. The women have gotten terrific. I'm just so impressed with their skating and puck handling. But just make it literally a show, if you follow me.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. I saw some snippets of the Pro Bowl yesterday. And I mean, these are, you don't want to hurt a guy in that game, but do you see when they were chasing guys downfield, they would tap him on the back instead of grab his legs. Don't play the game if you're not going to play it. I
know.
You remember in basketball, NBA too. It's like their All-Star games, 160 to 140. Remember the NHL got to the point. That's why they started the 3-on-3. Where it was like 15 to 12. Which is a lesson for coaches as well. If you take all the hitting out of hockey, it's a different game.
The only All-Star game that actually is good is baseball because it's an individual sport.
Yeah, it's impersonal.
It's the pitcher and the batter.
Uh-huh.
The other guys are peripheral. It's a team because there's a bunch of guys and there is some team effort. But it's just one-on-one. The pitcher is going to throw the ball to that he hopes the batter doesn't hit it, and the batter's going to try and hit the ball. And so it's really the only All-Star game that actually is played the same way that the regular season games are played.
I couldn't agree more. And hockey is just a good example. The more you take, and I'm not talking about the hits that hurt guys, and in fact they've done a pretty good job of taking that out of the game. I'm talking about a guy comes over the blue line with his head down, or carries a football over the line of scrimmage with his head down. You find out how good he really is after he takes a pop or two, and has to worry about that. That's a part of the skill of the game. But now they just come across. They come through the middle of the rink like they've been shot out of guns. That's just, I don't know how they do it. I mean, have you watched McDavid yet? Have you got a chance? Did you go on YouTube?
I did. Yeah.
Isn't it absurd?
I did watch him. Yeah, he scored a highlight reel goal in one game that I watched, which was he has got hands. Holy moly!
He's the only guy. And even Gretzky didn't do this. Gretzky made them get crazy. But he's the only player I've ever seen who'll see three guys back and say, all right, let me just attack them. And it's absurd. And he dances around them, and they're falling, and it's like a comedy. Oh, no, he's not human. They got to give him a saliva test.
When I was waiting to call, I was just browsing on Yahoo and see what was going on their news feed. And they said that this coming weekend is going to be Groundhog Day. And I was thinking, boy, how many people think that a groundhog can predict the weather, but they won't believe scientists that there's global warming?
No, yeah, please, just don't even get me. You're going to start me on this thing. I was reading the statistic, like 25% of Americans don't know, or maybe it's like 25 or 40%, don't know that the Earth revolves around the sun. I'm done. These people are allowed to vote, and they will be voting for the Yahoo. He is an American, and he's going to make Jesus come a second time by supporting the folks over there in Israel. Please, give me a break. Don't worry.
Oh man, yeah. I think the groundhog may have gone to Stanford, and studied meteorology and things like that. So.
Oh, listen, I kept my word to my listeners, which could be an interesting threat. I wrote my letter to, and I applied to work in the Michael Bloomberg campaign. Put my money where my mouth is.
Oh, I saw they replied. There's a job for you in the mailroom.
Hey, you worked in the mailroom. Shall we go there? Shall we go, Mr. Bonded Mailing? Shall we go there? Who worked in
all the packages out that they've been?
Who worked in the mailroom?
That guy that we knew. They put him down in the mailroom, checking all the incoming packages when all those bomb scares were happening down on Wall Street.
Do you know what story I told? I can't remember the context within which I told it. Remember when I was running the correspondence unit up at Merrill Lynch, the letter writing unit, and one guy misspelled the word inconvenience, so the timid idiot manager of the whole department banned everybody from using the word.
Well, that works. I mean,
no.
Misspell it.
In a department where the very essence is to write letters of apology, you ban the word inconvenience. Why don't he just change it to, "Hey, I'm sorry we effed up"? That was early in my career when I learned about the timidity of people who wanted to be managers but didn't want the responsibility of being a manager. It's like the schools are going to do that soon. In New York, Carranza, the racist idiot, is going to do that soon. He's probably going to try and get to change the spelling of words if people of color can't spell it right. He's ridiculous.
Well, we've experienced some of that here in our little municipality. I won't go into details because I don't want to, say who the people were.
Throw them
but
under the.
We had to get some information, and I went to someone who was in a managerial position. They're not an elected official; they're an employee. And I said, I need such and such information. And they said, "Oh, it's in Susie's desk, and it's locked. So you'll have to wait till Monday." And I said, "You don't have the key?" And the person kind of rolled their eyes and said, "Oh, Susie."
Do you know?
I'm saying, "No, you're the manager. You're in
don't
charge.
Get me
that
started.
person works for you."
Do you know, I as you know, I read voraciously to the point where my brain is turning to mush. And I have read every single, even though they're comic books, it's a 3-hour read. I have read every single strip just about now that Scott Adams has ever written about Dilbert.
Mm-hmm.
And if you buy those books or read that column, and you don't need a shrink, because he captures everything that goes on in business. My now that I'm years from it, my favorite business story of how frustrating it is was the time that my boss, this is when I was a COO to a CEO of one of the divisions. I was talking about AT. And he says, "I want you to go and get this $11 million from the head of that division. Please, as my MD." I go, "No, Bob, I'm not giving you the money till your boss calls me." So I go back, and he said, "All right, set up a meeting." So I set up a meeting, right, between the two of them and our seconds, if you will. It was like a duel. And my boss looks at me, and he says, "All right, Bob, where's the money?" I said, "I set up this meeting for you to ask him. He wanted to talk to you. I'm not asking him. I'm asking you." No, and you just want to take your head and go bing, 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 and bang it against the wall.
Oh, my God.
I'll never forget that. Or the time I went to the head of risk, and I said, "Hey, listen, you got this particular business. You got to get out of this business. They are giving bad information to all 7 million of our customers." And he was the head. He said, "Bob, that's why I wanted to talk to you. What can you do to get rid of this business?" "I can't. I work for the same guy they do." Let me do it again. Bing, bing, bing. But this goes on every day in business. People want the big check in the corner office, but they don't want the responsibility and the risk that goes with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are
Yeah,
just a
it's
couple
true.
of my great business stories. It's like, I'll never forget it. He's right there. I'm actually, if you're watching on TV, I'm pointing in the direction where this guy was sitting. This is the same guy, by the way, who I was trying to keep from giving away $55 million that he didn't have to give away.
Mm-hmm.
It had to do with the deal we had with the Bloomberg. And he says, close the door. What? He goes, $55 million isn't anything. Dan Tully's retiring this year, and I want him to look good, and I want all of this to go well with this deal we're doing, so forget about the $55 million. Absolute true story. May I do it again? Will you allow me to do it again? Are you ready?
Sure. Yep.
All right. I got to go. Now that you got me started on my Wall Street career, which I loved until the end. All right, listen, I got to go. I got to talk to the Mr. Latimer. So thank you very much, Vince. And we go now to the county executive who is with us each and every Monday morning, and we're grateful for it. Good morning, County Executive George Latimer.
Good morning, Bob. How are you today?
Oh, pretty well. You know, we've been getting a lot of calls. I know as a county executive, you're also a human being and follow sports, and your reaction to the Kobe Bryant and the loss of his daughter and all those folks.
Well, obviously a terrible tragedy. Kobe, if you have a table of the 10 greatest basketball players in the history of the game, Kobe's at that table, and his talent was clearly superior along with the very greatest of the game, Michael Jordan, Will Chamberlain, Bill Russell, certainly currently LeBron James. But his personality, I mean, when he came up as a teenager, he was a little cocky, as you might imagine.
Oh, yeah.
Because he was that good, that young. But he became a tremendous citizen of the game, a good businessman, obviously a very devoted father. And to lose him at 41, you just think about it yourself, Bob. You and I are not far apart in age. Imagine if we had died at 41. Go back and put a year to that.
I was thinking,
and then think of all the things that happened in your life that you wouldn't have experienced had you died at 41. It would have been just incalculable.
That's
and so
why.
to lose him at this age.
That's why I've been using, that old axe, but it's true. For whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. We all think about it. My God, what if I died when I was 41? You're absolutely right.
I mean, for me, I'm 66. That's 25 years ago. And 25 years is more than a third of my life. And things that have happened since then are significant. So he had a significant portion of his life ahead of him. And then also to die with one of his daughters, and she was apparently a big basketball player, and she had barely started life at 13. So it's a tragedy, and, we'll find out from the Transportation Board what actually happened. But none of that brings him back. None of that, corrects this loss.
No, and I keep thinking most of the morning I've been of course, covering it as a news story, but I keep thinking of his daughter. And just knowing that as if that plane was going down, that helicopter, he's going to lose his daughter too. And the only solace there is if one had to lose a child or a grandchild, at least you get to hold her. But I can't even imagine it. Anyway, I just was wondering how you felt about it.
Before we leave that topic, Bob, let's also, I don't know the names of the other 7 people, but I don't want to treat them as if they're not anybody.
Oh, no, we talked about them, yes.
No, I know. I just let me say it.
Yes.
I think it's important for us to recognize that every time you open up the newspaper and you hear about a life lost, and those that were done not through any fault of their own, the accident that somebody crashes into somebody else and takes their life, the pedestrian that gets hit by the drunk driver, every one of those lives is as important to their family as Kobe Bryant is. And sometimes we do focus on celebrities because we know who they are, but those other 7 people, whoever they are, they have families, they had a future, and all of that was lost yesterday morning.
Absolutely. One of them, a county executive, evidently was the best friend. They didn't give a lot of names yet, of his daughter, who was on the same basketball team they were going to practice at. So, yeah, very sad story.
Well, you can imagine how exciting it must have been. Listen, my dad's going to fly us over in the helicopter. We'll be there like in no time. It'll be so much fun, and then it turns to this.
Well, God bless them wherever they're headed. County Executive, you're a busy man as always. Last week we saw a few different stories of point, counterpoint regarding the trial beginning for the Playland. Any news on that front?
No, not particularly. The LOHUD has, printed a lot of the stories from the standard side of things. I suppose that's where the news is. The government is wrong and the other guy is right. But every motion that they've made, we've responded to, I think, effectively. And I think when we go to court, we have a very strong case to make. It's not appropriate to make that case in the public domain. You know how open and accessible I am.
Mm-hmm.
Every week here and in other venues. So I'm not one to hide information from people, but, we're under pretty straightforward orders from the court. Try the case in the public. So even though there are people who say things on Facebook, they don't know what to talk about, but on free speech, they have the right to say it. They're not necessarily right just because they have the right to say it, but there's all kinds of comments being made. We'll handle ourselves in the court of law. We believe we're right. We think we're on the right principle. And it also comes down to one other thing too. I saw a little bit of rumble about how much is this going to cost. Well,
yes.
Standard went to court. We went to court to defend our decision. So we're not going to listen to folks who say, well, don't spend the money. It's a waste of money. We're defending a legitimate public policy decision we make. If the message becomes that we're behind the things we believe in, that we're not prepared to get the right kind of legal representation as the other side has, then every developer out there is going to know. Every special interest is going to know, oh, well, the county's not going to stand behind their opinion. So just push them around, and they'll cave. And we're not going to do that. We're going to fight for what we think is right. And, unfortunately, there's a litigious world, and there are people who want their corporate interest, and they will go to court to defend it. And we will go to court to defend what we believe is the public interest. That's pretty simple to me. Now, the judge will decide.
Now, is this a judge trial, not a jury trial?
Yes, it's not a jury trial. It's a civil action rather than a criminal action. So it's not a jury of your peers. It's the judge will decide. This is bankruptcy court, which is a specialty court. Of course, I think it's interesting that this was the venue picked, I think purposely so, to try to create an analysis just on the business metrics rather than on some broader metrics. But that's okay. We'll do our thing, and we'll be prepared for what's ahead, and we'll see how it all plays out.
I saw a press release the other day about reduced truck strikes on King Street. That's no small thing. We've been reporting for years, and you and we have spoken about it for years, the truck strikes on the Hutch, et cetera. What is the progress attributable to, and can we expect more?
Well, what we have is a 1-year improvement in certain provisions. Now, the provisions weren't there on day one, and you could no doubt, particularly those who are critics, say, well, we can't take the other thing. It was 24 bridge strikes in 2018, and 2019, 8 bridge strikes. That's 1/3, a drop of 16, and I have to believe that some of the measures, which are signage and other intercept devices that the state was able to fund and put into place, and not just right at the bridge, at the approaches to the bridge. So if you drive up Marrone Avenue, you go on the Hutch North, you will see signage that you did not see before. If you're on 287 going east or west approaching the Hutch, you'll see signage you did not see before. And we believe those things have been very helpful in reducing the number of bridge strikes. Now, the thing to keep in mind is the truck driver does not want to strike the bridge. This is not trying to get somebody to have good behavior. This is to alert them to something which they're just ignorant of because they're not reading signs. There's plenty of signs out there. It's not as if there's not signs, but you have to make them more prominent, more eye-catching. And I think at the end of the day, the big success will come when the GPS systems, and that's a generic phrase, GPS. It stands for Google, Waze, and Garmin, and a host of other entities. But when that industry decides that bridge clearance should be a part of their standard, not the specialty, the commercial one, but the standard GPS system, then these bridge strikes will drop. Because what you have in the current generation, Bob, you know it and I know it as oldsters, is a slavish attention to GPS. People will drive If they plug in a route, they pay no attention. They just drive until the little voice says, in approximately 2 miles, move to the right. They do exactly what the little voice says. If the little voice says drive off the bridge, they probably do that. And the bottom line is that many of the truckers who are not from this area, not like the old days when you didn't have the system, they planned their route, they'd look at maps.
Yeah.
Nope. They just listen to the GPS, and the GPS doesn't differentiate, regular GPS does not differentiate that the Hutch is not the New England Thruway.
And plus, we were taught early on that a parkway meant trucks can't go on it, but evidently they didn't get that memo.
Here's the deal, Bob. You and I grew up in New York, where there's the parkways on the island and the Palisades in New Jersey and Rockland and the Merritt and the Wilbur Cross. They're all parkways. Those are northeastern realities.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to the south, there are no parkways. There are few Blue Ridge Park. There's very few of them, though. Most of them are interstate highways, and the interstate highways have clearance for trucks. The parkways do not. So you're coming out of the south or the Midwest. You're driving into this area, perhaps for the first time, or you take a quick alternate route off of the New England Thruway because there's a jam in Norwalk, and so you figure, oh, well, look at this. I could go parallel on this other road. It's the same thing. Well, it's not the same thing, but you don't know it. You didn't grow up in this area. And when we've interviewed, and we have all the trucks that were in some sort of a truck accident, they were all, drivers from outside the region. None of them came from this area.
That makes a lot of sense.
That's the unfortunate difference.
Allow me to reset. My guest is County Executive George Latimer. He is here each and every Monday morning. If you're listening out of county, of course, he is the Westchester County Executive. We're talking about the issues of the day as well. His clear demonstration that he could be the voice of your next GPS. Imagine if you were here in Westchester County, don't get on the Parkway. This is George Latimer, the County Executive. Let me move on. County Executive.
Well, let me say this. But don't you think you should have a New York voice on the GPS? Hey, you stupid! Turn over, get to the next lane. That would be a New York voice that New Yorkers would listen to. Hey, what are you, stooge? Get out of that lane. Come on.
What's wrong with you?
That you and I grew up on.
What's wrong with you?
Yeah. What's the matter with you?
Hey, yo,
listen
up.
You're crying now. I'm gonna give you something to cry about. We have all those things in common.
I got your bridge right here. That's
right.
All right, no.
I think you got a new comedy shtick
the
next time you can stand up. Bob.
I
waiting for you.
Anyway, this is talk about extremes. Of course, I know your health department, yourself, all very concerned, as are all health departments right now. Evidently, the coronavirus, and this over the weekend, China is taking even still more drastic measures. And one health official in Hong Kong is saying that some of the steps may well be draconian. Is the county tracking that? How concerned are you?
Well, we're concerned that we are tracking it. In fact, there was a prospective case of a coronavirus individual who had been in Wuhan and then came to Westchester to visit a relative. And that individual was quarantined late last week, determined that they did not have the virus. We didn't put out a press release on it to let the world know, we're tracking it. But that's the kind of stuff that our health department does. And when I say routinely, it makes it sound like it's a very easy automatic thing. But this is exactly how you stay on top of these things in advance. If you'll recall, we were very fortunate last year when the measles outbreak came, and it had a very devastating effect in Rockland and in Brooklyn in certain communities, but it didn't hit Westchester at the same level of intensity. And I would argue in part, that's because our health department officials were right on it immediately and want to stay on top of these things.
Well, yeah, it seems like a difficult and tough responsibility. County Executive, I have one other item for you before I open it up for whatever you have on your plate. A lot of noise now is being made about how the governor will solve this budget gap. And we're all beginning to worry that this county and other counties, et cetera, New York, are going to feel it with respect to Medicaid costs.
Well, we're concerned about it as well. We're looking at the formula that was put out by the governor in his budget. It does not specify numerically how that's going to affect the county, but we think it's going to be very devastating. And, it's one of these complicated issues, and you start to explain it, a person would hear it and say, well, what does that mean? You'd have to look at the actual cost of Medicaid to determine what the cost would be on the county government. The simple way to look at it is that the state has a level of benefit and an open door for enrollment, and the county administers those rules. We can't change. If a person is eligible, we have to enroll them, and they generate the benefits they generate, particularly long-term care. If you get into a nursing home, you're spending $10,000-$12,000 a month on your health care. That's really beyond our ability to control that. The state has the ability to root out Medicaid fraud with their Medicaid investigators, which we as a county government do not have. So I think it's a little specious to talk about, the county's got to have skin in the game. The county's got plenty of skin in the game. We pay $223 million a year for our portion of Medicaid. Medicaid is rising, but we haven't made decision one that increases those costs. So, I'm going to speak out about it this week, and we're going to try to convince the legislature there has to be a different strategy. Now, I understand that the state is trying to balance their budget, but if they balance it on the back of the county,
yeah, that's going to be tough.
You're going to shift over from an income tax to a property tax problem.
Mm-hmm. And that's exactly.
I'm sorry, Bob. Let me just make that point clearer so everybody understands it.
Go ahead.
If you put more costs onto the county away from the state, you may balance the state budget, but then you put pressure on the counties, which levy property taxes.
Mm-hmm.
And most people don't want to see their property taxes go up. I strove mightily to cut property taxes this past year by even just a little bit. And now this could destabilize that. This could be a $7 million, $10 million hit to our budget. And and there's no place for us to go to deal with it. We'd have to slash services, and then look at tax increases, all because of this mandate. So I think they have to look at the holistic picture of how does a taxpayer respond to it. And so we'll see how it goes, but we're not happy about it.
No, I didn't expect you would be, and it's something we'll have to keep an eye on. Well, you'll have to keep an eye on, and we'll just have to wait and see. We're passing through 752. Our guest, County Executive, Westchester County Executive George Latimer. We've been covering a number of issues. What's coming up for you? What's on your agenda, County Executive?
Well, we got a lot that's been going on. I'll try to cut through them as quickly as I can.
Go ahead. You got time.
We had a
County Executive there?
20. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now, sir.
And you
went out again.
Over 20 executives. Robert, are you there?
I'm here now,
Hello?
Sir.
Okay. Well, I'm trying to stay here. Okay.
I think you went behind the moon. Go ahead. We're good.
Well, I'm just trying to answer the question.
No, I
so
don't.
we have over 20 people from the FAA that were brought up to Westchester County last Wednesday night in Chappaqua to discuss the issues of airport noise. Very important to a certain percentage of the county.
Mm-hmm.
Very concerned about the disruption of their lives with airport noise. It was a health. It showed the FAA that there is broad-based interest and concern about it in Westchester. Take the issue seriously at the FAA level. We hope that will open up the door for some progress and changes to come. Also, last week, we began the local municipal meetings to implement our affordable housing strategy. We had 2 meetings with regional groups of elected officials, and we have a couple more line for that, what we put into the report that came out back in November,
mm-hmm.
and how we can work together to put more affordable housing out of the unit. This week, later today, we're going to be launching the 2020 census effort. The county and the local governments are going to make an effort to inform everybody about the coming census. We want to get as accurate a count as we can get. It's essential for both representation and grant funding, and we'll have a big kickoff event today. On Wednesday, we're releasing the results of our food waste recycling study. We think that's the next big thing that we have to do in the county to reduce recycling, is to
mm-hmm.
increase recycling and reduce waste, is to get food waste out of the normal garbage cycle and into a separate composting cycle. And we're going to lay out what our plans are along those lines. Also, last week, we launched our new tourism campaign, which it's entitled Beyond Expectations. It's a way to promote travel into Westchester. Very important for the hotels, the restaurants, and the attractions that we promote Westchester as a destination. So I know this year is about the state races, and it's about the primaries, and it's about the presidential race. It's not about the county government, but we're just working on every cylinder. We're trying to do the things we think are appropriate. We understand that, a lot of these issues aren't going to be resolved in a year or two, but we're doing our best, and I think we're working, fairly effectively.
Well, so far so good, and hopefully the tax receipts are still doing okay. The sales tax receipts, etc.
Well, we see them on a quarterly basis, so we
see.
haven't yet seen the numbers for the fourth quarter of the year. We expect we're going to be fine and close out the 2019 budget in good order and prepare for the 2020 budget effectively. And we're hopeful that, in fact, the economic strength of the area and of the country will help us, achieve the numbers that we've set down. We don't anticipate, as long as the state doesn't drop a bomb on us, we don't expect any fiscal crises for the next couple of years. And, but you never know. In this world, Kobe Bryant goes to the airport, hops in a helicopter like he's done hundreds of times before. You just don't know. So
That's so
you
true.
walk through the world. You walk through the world humbly. You understand that you've got a task to do. You do it, but you don't swagger. You don't act bigger than your britches, as my mother would say.
Well said. County Executive, thank you very much. Travel safely, and we'll talk to you again soon, sir.
Okay, always a pleasure, Bob.
The pleasure's ours. County Executive George Latimer, thank you very much. We're going to get Jake in the saddle. We certainly have things to talk about with him regarding sports. It almost seems like a back pager now, or a middle of the paper issue, the Super Bowl coming up. And, of course, the Knicks won last night, but during their game, everyone was more concerned about the events of yesterday. But let's move on. We need to reset a little bit. All right, let's take a look at the weather. Of course, I buried it under all my other news copy. It is 40 degrees already. It's going to get up to 45 today. Only a 10% chance of rain. Broken clouds, but we can see as we look west, and we can see it from we have like 8 windows in this radio station. We see the cloud cover moving with blue skies and sunshine right now, and that's the way it's going to be. Your day, mixture of sun and clouds, a few scattered flurries later. I doubt that, though. It's 10% chance. I don't think you'll see it. We'll get up to 45, and then we'll level off around 43 the rest of the day. Tonight, partly cloudy to mostly clear with lows around 31, some upper 20s north and west. Tuesday, a mixture of sun and clouds, breezy with winds northwest 10 to 20 miles per hour, highs around 40 degrees. Wednesday, mostly sunny skies, a high of 39. And on into Thursday, mostly sunny again. The high will be 36. Those ought to be fun days. And the weather is brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. The bottom of the hour is supported by Plug-in Virtual Reality, Aging Issues Management, and their partners, Aging Issues Radio, the law firm of Payne & Kahn, and Dominic's Fine Cigars, licensed retailer with a big selection, including Arturo Fuente, Padrons, and more. Dominic's Fine Cigars, they're located on Boston Post Road in Larchmont, where, if all things stay as they're planned, we will be broadcasting from their smoke room for our Super Bowl pre-show on Friday. And of course, we're supported this hour by the United Hebrew of New Rochelle, a top-rated campus of senior care. Visit uhgc.com. And we go now to our own sports guy, who also does production and other things here at the radio station. Please welcome once again Jake Schaefer. Good morning, Jake.
Good morning.
Wow. We did the story today, of course. What was your reaction yesterday?
Jeez, in this day and age, what a fantastic tribute Kobe got. Everywhere, wall-to-wall tributes.
Wall-to-wall tributes.
Very good basketball player.
Great basketball player. What about how, you'd be shocked, a lot of people got outside the basketball realm calling in earlier today. And what's your
do you mean?
sensibility. A 41-year-old guy with everything.
Talking
to
about the
live
Me
for.
Too movement?
No, $500,000.
Oh.
No, we weren't going there. $500,000, $500 million, taking his daughter to a basketball game, loses his life.
A helicopter was moving very fast. I know it was going 160 miles an hour. I didn't know helicopters could move that fast.
Yeah, but that particular helicopter, its cruise speed is its max, by the way. That's the way the thing cruises. The thing is, did it hit something or did it have a problem and go down?
I think there was a lot of fog.
But yeah, but they have systems to deal with that. Again, I know that the Los Angeles Police Department grounded their helicopters, but I don't know how they're equipped. In this particular Sikorsky has what's called ground proximity warning systems, and most of them are forward-looking, so you could see a slope coming. So that's either pilot error or the fog did get to them, but they hit that slope apparently pretty low. So I don't know. I really don't know. But you mentioned the Me Too movement, which obviously you were talking about the fact that he had a rape challenge several years ago, but he was acquitted, was he not?
No, I read the case last night. I read the police report last night.
What was it?
Pretty damning.
But why wasn't he? Was he not convicted?
I
Was
think
it just dismissed, or did he settle?
They reached a settlement.
What's your take? I mean, you opened the issue.
Fantastic basketball player. I'm just shocked at the tributes, wall to wall. I wanted to watch CNN to see about John Bolton last night, and
That Bolton story is huge.
Kobe
yeah.
Bryant. All tributes to Kobe Bryant. He's a great basketball player, but it's very surprising to me.
Well, you know what? And I like your skepticism about this. It's going to make you a good news guy down the road. But what I get the sense of, and another part of being a news guy, is I didn't know he was this beloved by his peers and by other people. But that tells you a lot. But it also tells you about, life's a trip. And he may have done what he's accused to have done, but he also is obviously all these other things too. It's very hard to pigeonhole people,
and
isn't
Harvey
it?
Weinstein made some good movies too.
Yeah, go figure.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what about my biggest sensibility was towards his daughter, 13-year-old
Yeah,
girl.
that's the tough one.
You mentioned I wanted to go to that. Since you brought it up, let's do a little politics because it affects. How would you like to be the president's lawyers? And now the all day yesterday and all day today, it's going to be dominated the news by what happened with Kobe Bryant, and it's almost as if God was saying, I think I'm going to take Kobe up early, give him a nice spot here, and I'm going to obscure lies. That's my own take. It's just my personal take.
Come on, Bob.
Oh no, come
You're
on.
so jaded.
Well, no, but it's true. Bolton, and I did read on Bolton, and I did the story this morning. Bolton's book confirms the accusations. Now, it doesn't mean that he needs to be removed from office. That's up to the Senate. But it just shows how feckless is this defense that says it didn't happen. I just wish they wouldn't do that. Just say it happened. We're not going to impeach him. We don't believe it rises to that.
Why is no one asking why Trump isn't going to testify? Didn't Ken Starr have Clinton in a basement somewhere
but that was
for hours
Well, Ken Starr, who turned out to be a chicken hawk. In fact, I have a chicken that I remember had it the other day. I got to bring it back when the next time it's in the car. The next time we discuss, did I say Ken Starr? I meant Mueller. That would have happened if Mueller insisted, but he didn't. But nonetheless, the real issue is why. What I find more troubling about that is, on one hand, to say you didn't finish your investigation, but they couldn't finish the investigation because the president wouldn't allow them to answer the subpoenas. So it's like some of the stuff I went through on Wall Street. Anyway, let's get to some other things in sports as well.
I got a good text from my brother. He wrote just 10 minutes ago, some idiot just broke into my car and left his cell phone in his car.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So hopefully my brother will call in and give us the story.
He should. Tell him. Does he have the number?
Yeah.
Tell him to call in. Do you think he's listening right now? If you're listening, Jeff, you have two responsibilities.
Someone broke into his car and
left. No, but I want the story, but I also want you to dish on your brother. I mean, why waste the fun? Well, I remember early on when I first started in radio and I didn't have I didn't yet have a good feel for format, and I was doing nights. I used to do a lot of things like that. And there was this one guy who robs a gas station, right? And then he takes off, but he gets lost. So while he's lost, he pulls up to a gas station to get directions. The cops arrived at the same time. It was the same gas station. Or another guy, he robs a 7-Eleven, but he had a hat on with his name. I love stories like that. You know, in fact, there's this book that comes out every year, people who shouldn't be allowed to reproduce because they're so stupid, or de-evolution kinds of things. The Knicks won last night, but what are you reading about, and what is your take on the upcoming Super Bowl?
I put together a Super Bowl pop quiz for you.
I'm ready.
So we'll both take it. We'll do it throughout the week. It's
You ready to
Chiefs
start
are
me
favored
off
by
right now?
1, so that's one of the questions.
Which one?
Chiefs
Chiefs
favored by 1. That's one question. Will Patrick Mahomes throw for over? No, put that back.
Oh, no, you look. No. If your brother's watching this, there he is. You look fun. Put that back. Oh, God. Put that back.
Will Patrick Mahomes throw for over 2.5 touchdowns? Will Jimmy Garoppolo throw for over 242 yards?
Okay.
Who will win the coin toss?
Okay,
I'll give this all out to you tomorrow.
Oh, no, I thought you, because I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go in the first two. I'm ready to go in the first three.
All right, who's going to win the coin toss?
Oh, that was one I can't tell. Don't know. That's a DK. I have to answer?
It's a 50-50.
Okay. I think the 49ers will win.
All right.
I have to keep records here. 49ers will win the coin toss. Now, what was that first thing?
Who's going to win the game? Chiefs favored by 1. Who do you like?
Chiefs.
Will Patrick Mahomes throw for over 2.5 touchdowns?
Yes.
Will Jimmy Garoppolo throw for over 242 yards?
No.
Interesting.
Because they go running game. It's a running game, 49ers. Now, everyone that I read, but this is me not knowing what you know about football, says the 49ers are the better team. Do you agree with that?
They're a better defensive team. If they can get it into a smash mouth game, Chiefs are going to win easily. But I think Kansas City. I think Andy Reid might have a couple tricks up his sleeve for this one.
Because I do keep remembering that game when Mahomes had to bail his defense out, when they gave up 31 points, but they won because he threw for 50 points.
And Mahomes is very young. Is he ready for this spotlight yet?
Yeah, I think he's the Muhammad Ali of football. I think this kid just has it. But where I will defer to you, or at least the notion that the 49ers are better, as a coach and an athlete all my life, defense wins championships unless you are so enormously gifted offensively. And Mahomes may just be the guy, but you can't give up 30 points and win the Super Bowl.
Which leads to my favorite propositional bet, Super Bowl propositional bet.
What's that?
Will a non-quarterback win the MVP?
Wow. Okay, I'm going to go there since you brought it up. I don't know the name of the guy, but evidently in the one of the playoff games, the 49ers had some back that ran for a gazillion yards. What's his name?
I can't pronounce his name, but it's Mozart.
Mozart?
Yeah,
almost like Mozart, almost like the great composer.
Yes.
So the guy that can do it, two guys can do it. A back that runs for a few hundred yards, because that's a lot for a back, or someone that can sack Mahomes.
Bosa.
Yeah. If someone sacks Mahomes, how many sacks would it take to get an MVP? Like 3, 4?
Or a defensive touchdown, a sack strip, run it into the end zone.
And pull it out of the young boy's hands. Taking candy from a baby is what they'll say.
That's my favorite Super Bowl bet. Will a non-quarterback win the MVP? I don't know about that one yet. I'll have to think about that. I will answer all of these questions on Friday.
All right, but at least I gave them a tease. I answered a few. As you can tell, I like the Chiefs, and this only goes back to my early days when I followed football. I don't know if you've read about it, but back in the 60s, the Chiefs and the Raiders had a rivalry to as good as any in sports. And you had Kenny Dawkins, was it? Kenny Stabler was the quarterback, and Darryl LaMonica was the quarterback for...
Wasn't Len Dawson, or Len Dawson was before that?
It was after that. And although I guess it's 50 years ago, so even I'm not that brilliant. But it was incredible rivalry, just incredible rivalry. And you never missed the Chiefs. Just like you didn't miss in those days, you didn't miss a Green Bay game. You didn't miss when the Chiefs played the Raiders. And that's when the Raiders began to build up their evil empire. I just think they made a mistake moving as much as they did. I think they took something away from their brand. They were always the Oakland Raiders and should have stayed there. But it's all about the Bucks.
I think we're gonna have Bud Poliquin on later this week, hopefully.
Yeah, in fact, I'm gonna make.
I have a good question for the two of you.
I'm gonna make even more time for him. By the way,
What would if Derek Jeter played for the Kansas City Royals? What percentage of the Hall of Fame vote would he have gotten?
What a great question. I'm not going to answer it.
Let's not think that he has the 5 because the Yankees obviously spend a lot more money than a smaller team,
right. And he had a lot.
He
of
doesn't
help.
have all the World Series accolades.
Right.
So Jeter played for the Tampa Bay Rays. What percentage of the Cooperstown vote would he have gotten?
I have my own opinion, but
I would say
go ahead. No, let's
80, around 80.
That's what I think. 80. I think you're absolutely right. I think 80 would be the answer.
But that's a good question.
A
So
train must be coming. Oh, there's a train. I'm starting to get used to all this. People are running now for the train. I get a kick out of this. All right. The baseball is not going to go away, the crisis in baseball. I've been reading a lot about this Luis Rojas, and he seems to be, at least in terms intellectually, the real deal. But it's one thing to manage in the major leagues and another in the minors, particularly the pressure from the press and everything else. What's your reasoned take on all this?
oh, he's so great. Why wasn't he the first choice?
Well, that's always the case, yeah. Well, all right. Well, you're in a... I don't know if I like this, but if it's good for the news, you're in a cynical mood today. You should be covering some of the political things I cover.
I know.
Like you should be looking into why in fact, I'm going to be asking A.J. Woodson why the controller's in the news again in that city. Actually, A.J. is going to be joining us. He had a chance to interview Ms. Roca, the woman who's challenging Mr. Scarpino, the DA. And it makes no sense for someone to challenge a sitting person in your own party for DA unless you're going to change the political agenda. So it's going to be very interesting. He's coming on May 20.
So what happens if Trump is gone in November? Who runs for the Republicans? And Pence can't do it, I don't think. I think Pence will be too stained.
You mean what you're saying is if he gets...
If Trump is in jail.
He won't be in jail, but they won't. They're just not going to vote to impeach him. He was right. He can shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue, and they're not going to impeach him, Jake.
I don't know. They're going to take the witnesses, I think.
But even if they take the witnesses, the Republicans are just not going to do it. They're just going to change their tune. I mean, what troubles me about folks supporting Trump, I understand what they don't like about the way Schiff has proceeded, although I don't necessarily agree with them, but I understand what they don't like. But what I wish they would face up to is the fact that the president, his people, change the story every day.
Well, I think the witnesses will open a brand new Pandora's box.
But the Pandora's, but it's known. All they're going to do is
And this guy's got more secret videos coming out.
No, but the fact of the
What's
matter
his name?
is...
Piranha?
Pernis. But here's the point. If you do your homework, and this isn't to you, it's obvious the president did this. If you wish, and that's where the line needs to be drawn, and Bolton just reconfirmed that. As it has been with a lot of other things the president's done. But it's also okay to say, fine, but that doesn't meet the standard for removal from office. I'm with it, if that's what you believe. That's fine. But what I have been absolutely adamant about with this administration, and what I won't let go of, is the need to present fake facts and to lie to our faces day after day after day after day.
I don't know. I think Mitt Romney sees the long game.
I think he does. I think, but I don't think he's going to be removed from office. I really don't. I think that we've long passed the point where the men and women we elect act on our behalfs. They act in their own personal interest. Number one. Number two, having said that, it's also fair game that if the opposition party isn't moved by what we know, to take out a president, then he shouldn't be removed. Let the people do it at Election Day. And I accept that. But what I won't accept is that it didn't happen. I won't accept that it was a perfect call. I won't. I can't. I'd have to defy my own personal integrity, and I won't do it. I did what I said I would do. By the way, I did write the campaign for Michael Bloomberg. And I sent them a resume, and I said, you guys want my radio station or me working for you, because I believe that he's very much needed now. Mike, he doesn't need the money. He's got an ego. He's brilliant. He's sensible.
There's a lot of stuff about. The more I read about Bloomberg, there's a lot of non-disclosures in his background that he's had signed.
Such as?
He's had women sign non-disclosures. They can't come forward with allegations.
I don't doubt it. I do not doubt it. You notice you very rarely hear me mention the president's picadillos with women. Don't care. Didn't care with Clinton, although I wished he'd have not did it in the Oval Office and lied about it. I don't care. I really don't. What I want is, I don't expect people to be totally consistent in their lives. I think that is a fake. It's a fake. It's a synthetic standard. And maybe because it's where I grew up, I knew men who particularly of Italian descent, some, only because that's where I grew up. They were great family men who cheated. And they were honest as the day is long businessmen. Women, likewise. You can have a total integrity in one realm and not in another. That's just life. What I care about is when they take that oath of office in their professional lives, that they do what they're supposed to do and they honor the Constitution. After that, I'm fine, and even as regards Pence. Now, I wouldn't vote for Pence if you tortured me, unless, of course, he ran against AOC. But, however, I would rather see Pence president as an honest person I disagree with, who did 15 things I didn't like, than one president who broke the law, who defied the Constitution, and who did things I did like. But I know that that's a minority view. That's kind of where I stand with it. What about you? Get into the political realm. You're going to be doing this a lot more in the days and years ahead.
I don't trust. I think the more we dig, we'll find out a lot about Pence. But how much digging is there to be done? That's the real question. That's what I think. The witnesses will be very interesting. I think the witnesses they're gonna have to come. I would think. Common sense.
Well, yeah. Oh boy, we're in the political realm now.
They already got Romney.
No, common sense does not apply in the political world.
How is Collins not going to vote for witnesses now?
Because she doesn't want to be primaried. The president threatens these people that he'll have them primaried. It's like but I'm going to turn this on the liberals now. And this is my take. And when I heard from my friend who we'll talk to in a little bit, A.J. Woodson, over the weekend, he asked me some questions for Ms. Rika, who is a TV star. Why she is running against a sitting DA who's been a judge, who's been an FBI agent, who has been relatively liberal. Why run against him as someone further to the left? Because I don't want to see the DA have a political agenda. I want them to enforce the laws in the book such as they are. And if laws are going to be changed, they should be changed in the legislature, not in law enforcement or in prosecutorial conduct. So, and the other question, I don't know if he asked him, because I'm going to ask her when she comes on. And I've been called by people, Bob, you got it all wrong. She's wonderful. Well, we'll find out. And the other thing is, we have and are living through a horrible example of what happens when a movie star, when a person is overly ambitious. Jeanine Pirro is a fake, phony, fraud, lying, narcissistic. I can go on and on. And when she was the district attorney, she was the same way. Now, she did some good things because she was driven by her ambition. But she also let people go to jail, and I know one personally who didn't have to go to jail. She played politics over this famous case in Durst. If that's what we're going to see from Rika, I don't want any of it. You want to be a TV star? Stay in TV. You want to be a senator? Run for the Senate. Don't use the DA's office as a platform. That's my take. So we'll see what AJ has to say. All right, one more thing. So right now, you don't have to tell us who it is before you go. Who are you leaning towards in the Super Bowl?
I did like the Chiefs, but now I'm thinking 49ers. I cannot decide yet. I need to think about it for a couple days. And my brother wants to call in. We need to get him a number.
Oh, I'll give you one that he should call. Hold on.
Jeff, get ready to call in. He's in Jersey City.
Oh, he's right here in Jersey City, huh?
Mm-hmm.
All right. We'll put him on. And if AJ's listening, we'll get to you in a few minutes, AJ. This is a breaking story. This is going to be fun.
You have terrible handwriting.
Of course I do.
Is this an 8 or a 6?
6.
Jesus.
Do you
Where
know
are you going to watch the Super Bowl, Bob?
I don't know yet. Probably right here. I don't know. Where are you going to watch it? No, don't you put it on the air, you knucklehead.
It's upside down.
What's wrong with you?
Dominic's Fine Cigars.
What about him?
That's where I'm going to watch the Super Bowl.
Oh, no, I couldn't. In fact, one of the things we got to figure out is they can't have too much cigar smoke. I'm allergic as much as I like it. When we do
It
the
does
show.
get smoky there, and I don't even know how to dress to wear my Sunday's worst.
No, you should wear your football clothes or whatever you would wear to watch Super Bowl.
On Friday?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you should. You don't have to dress up.
That smoke's not going to come out.
Does this guy know how to call?
Some people have
Does he
jobs.
No. When you call into Radio Westchester, this is your job.
This is the number I gave him. Is that correct?
I can't see. Yeah. Maybe he forgot the area code.
914, right?
What does he do for a Is he any good? What's he do? Where's he work?
He is a homeless man.
Your brother, I'm beginning to believe that. Your brother's homeless?
He's a homeless man. He lives in his car. His car was broken in. The guy,
No, but he's a financial services guy.
he's not a homeless man.
I know that. What does he do? Well, he could be.
He just passed the bar. We'll get the whole.
He's a
interview
lawyer?
him. We'll get
No,
the whole
because I got to
scoop
get
from
to a
him.
guest, too, who forgot to call in or hasn't called in yet, or he's on that same line. No, I left the line open. All right. Let me see if it's... No, I took a call from there this morning. Yeah, I got a dial tone. All right, plus where the hell is AJ then?
Killing time.
What's that?
Just killing time. So you know.
Where's your bro?
I just texted him the phone number. So what you do this weekend? Anything exciting, Bob? Were you in the studio working?
Yeah, I did. I did a lot of work in the studio with some proposals for people. I'm waiting to hear back, and did the books. Hold on a second. What I think. See, what happens is, just a little aside. What tends to happen is people who call the radio station because they don't listen to the whole show don't know it's formatted. Now we do a looser format here, but we're still formatted nonetheless. So. Let's see did somebody come in on the other? No. Let's see where AJ is. Where did AJ go? Here he is. Well, we're going to call him anyway. We'll be right back, folks. Yes, indeed. This is Radio Westchester. We're still going to hear from the other Schaefer. He's all tied up at work, a little nerves and stuff, but we'll get him back. Meanwhile, A.J. Woodson is going to be calling in on one of the other lines in just a moment. You're listening to Radio Westchester. It is 8:24. It's Mornings with Bob Marrone. I am Bob Marrone. You can see people. In fact, I should show you some of this. Watch this. Oh, there it is. Oh, that'll have to wait. Yeah, we're going to put this down. All righty, wait right there, guest. I'm fixing a camera. You know how it is in this business. You're going to look at the ceiling for now, and you're going to like it. All righty. Please welcome, without further ado, he is the editor-in-chief of Black Westchester magazine. Last night, he interviewed one of the candidates for the on his radio show, People Before Politics. He interviewed one of the candidates for the district attorney's office. Let's now go to A.J. Woodson, editor-in-chief, Black Westchester. Good morning, A.J. Hello. A.J. Oh, wait. Did we actually get Mr. Schaefer?
Hello?
Yes, who am I speaking with?
This is brother.
Oh, you did call. Okay, we'll get to AJ in a minute. He's going to call. Your brother told me that you were a little nervous to come on. That doesn't seem to me like a Schaefer. You should.
Yeah, he's the on-air talent. I stay in the background.
You should be yourself. This is an interesting story. And AJ, if you're listening, just bear with us. We'll get you in a minute. But this is an interesting breaking story, I guess, out of Jersey City. If I got it right, your car was broken into, but the alleged perpetrator, which we have to say in the news, she left their cell phone in your car?
Yes, they left it right on the driver's seat.
So how are you going to deal with this? Are you going to try and return it to him?
Well, I figure there are two ways I could do it. I could either call the cops or wait for someone to call them and extort them.
No. What are you going to do? You should call the cop. You're going to call the cop.
No, I'm going to call the police.
Hey, anything interesting on the cell phone? Any nice pictures?
It's dead. It's cracked and
it.
it's a Google phone, but I'm going to try to get into it.
Oh, that could be a lot of fun. So listen, I can't let you. I got a guest who's waiting, but I'll get back to the guest. But I got to ask you this: what's your weird brother like?
Oh, he's weird.
He is weird, isn't he? I mean, he was a comedian for 15 years.
Yep.
Now he's getting involved in radio. He does sports, and he's got a level of cynicism that the devil would be happy with.
Yeah, that's about right.
That is about right. But so, what was he like growing up? What can you dish on him? I mean, did he do anything weird? You know, one of the things, because you guys are from upstate, you know, I know he married his sister.
Yes, he did.
No.
Floaty.
So you guys are your own cousin. How did you pull that off? Anyway, no, dish on him a little bit. What was he like?
He was tough.
He was tough?
I still can't eat mustard because of a prank he pulled on me.
Terrorized him.
What did he do?
One night he snuck into my room while I was sleeping and poured a bunch of, it was payback. I had pulled his pants down at a family event.
Excuse
to get me back.
You what? How old was he?
33.
Oh my God. I don't know. What were you, 15?
Yeah, I was a teenager.
I was right about your family. So when your mother called out to the backyard, all right, stop playing and come on in, you were playing with each other then.
Jesus Christ.
What the heck?
It's the upstate way.
No, I guess it's the upstate way. I met his wife, very interesting woman, his sister, his cousin, whatever. And your parents, I understand, are upset with me as well. And
I don't know about that.
Yeah, that's what I heard. I've been picking on there. So what do you get? If you feel free, what do you do? What do you do for a living?
I work at Legal Services of New Jersey.
Oh, and you just passed the bar, correct?
Yeah, a couple of years back.
Oh, good for you! Congratulations.
Thank you.
So you're a lawyer. How often had you had to work to keep your brother out of jail?
Attorney-client privilege.
Let's go back. He actually pulled your pants down at a family event.
No.
Yeah, and so he got me back.
Around.
He when I was sleeping. He poured a bunch of hot mustard in my mouth and horseradish.
What an
and
evil...
I still can't eat those today.
Oh, my God. Now, when you pulled his pants down at the family event, there's no other way to... Were we talking elevator button here or what?
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Oh, no.
I mean, he didn't come up short, did he? Or...
I didn't
Jeff,
have the best
it was great
view.
to hear from you. See you next
No.
Christmas.
This is too good. Now, I'm sorry, and I was, because I've been trying to juggle a couple of calls, I was neglectful. Your first name, sir? Jeff. Okay, I like that.
Give a shout out to your firm.
He just...
legal services.
He did that already. As you see, your brother is quick. He's as quick as a glacier. Hey, Jeff, what a pleasure. If you've got other things, I've got to get to our other guest. I got to call him back.
Absolutely.
So, all right, take care and thank you.
All right, Jeff. Thank you.
All right, I'll speak with you.
Bye-bye. Oh, man, did he ever dish on you? All righty, let's go. Hi, radio, my friend. A call got in and we had to finish it. We had somebody dishing on Jake. It was pretty cool. His own brother dished on him. My guest, once again, folks, I reintroduce him. He is the editor-in-chief of Black Westchester Magazine, A.J. Woodson. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Did you hear this guy's Jeff's brother dish on him?
Oh, no. I was trying to call in.
No, I know. He pulled down his own brother to get even with an evil deed, pulled his pants down.
Oh,
okay. During a family event. And they've written a book about it. The Big Short. I'm going to hell. All righty. Last night, I got two issues to talk with you. Yesterday on People Before Politics, you interviewed one of the candidates for district attorney. Did you not?
Yes.
How'd that go?
It actually went good. I got to some of your questions at the end, but she actually said that was one of the most substantive interviews that she's had so far. So she's been thanking us all over Facebook for the interview. I think it was very good. I got to know her a little bit. I asked her some tough questions, which she answered. So I was pleased.
What did she have to say about why she's running? What is her reasons to run? What is her reasons? Real good English.
Scarpino is not doing the job.
What does that mean?
I agree with that. Scarpino has, specifically for Mount Vernon, Scarpino made a lot of promises. Scarpino has not prosecuted anything that had to do with corruption, whether it was the police department, whether it was City Hall. Scarpino has totally failed Mount Vernon his whole term. He's had information. I know several people that have brought stuff to him. He just has not done anything for Mount Vernon. And there were other cases of there was a case with some stuff going on in the police department in Eastchester, some stuff going on in the police department in Yonkers, the White Plains PBA, embezzlement of over $200,000. He's had all this information. He has done nothing about any of them.
Did she proffer a reason why, or did she just say it's time for him to go?
She basically, I would like you to listen to it yourself. So you can get exactly what she said.
I'm going to.
But basically, she called out that he was not doing the job for whatever the reason is. He was not doing the job of the district attorney. He has not been doing the job, basically.
That's good because I'm going to be interviewing him soon, and I'm going to listen to your interview, and I'm going to challenge him with some of her assertions. What about, and we will get her on here as well, and again, I'll get on to other things. I'm just wondering how those are fair assertions to make, by the way, and
right.
to say on her behalf.
When I asked her about, you said something about leaning to the left. She said that office needs to be the least political office, period.
Love it. Love the answer. Great answer on her part. Good answer.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
she's talking about competence, not trying. See, my big fear is, and you know this is happening. We saw Virginia Perez ruin her career by just thinking that with a Latino name she could run for something. I'm very suspicious of the people of color or Latino because of the change in our political culture stepping forward when they may or may not be qualified, just thinking that, well, I can do that now. Everybody thinks they're AOC.
As in the listening to her answers to the questions and going over her qualifications, I believe she is qualified.
Yeah, everybody says that. Yes, sir.
I was, and she also met with Damon and blacks in law enforcement, and Damon is very critical of anybody in that kind of position, and I believe he walked away pleased by their meeting.
That's good.
When she met with like him and Kenneth Chamberlain, and they had some questions for her, and she supposedly came through that one great too. So.
Okay, thank you for giving us a little bit of feedback. Anything else?
She also challenged. Well, we've extended the invitation for Scarpino to come, and she said that she made offers to have debates with him anywhere, and he has not accepted. And I put the challenge to him to come on by himself, and then I would host a debate on the show. Mm-hmm. She said she would definitely show up, so I don't expect Scarpino to accept. But we've been critical of him. He might not come on my show. Period. We've been critical of him.
I first met him when he debated. I guess it was two other people when he ran, and I still remember he won that debate. He's a little understated, but he didn't seem debate shy at the time. Hopefully, he will. I mean, certainly if he would ask me, assuming that he will come on this show, I think you're a fair arbiter. I mean, you may have been critical of him, but, being critical of someone for this or that doesn't mean you're critical of the entire person. You'll be fair. I know.
Right. And then I told her, I said, and I said on the air and during Huntington, I've been very critical of him, but I've had candidates on that I did not like, and I knew didn't have a chance in heck to win, but I've had them on and gave them a fair interview. You know what I mean? So.
Well, it's the same thing. I'm skeptical of her ambition. Okay. I'm skeptical of her ambition because she's already on TV, and Jeanine Pirro has left such a sour taste in my mouth.
And that's who you were talking about when you said that. There was so much going on, and I thought that's who you were talking about.
Oh God,
you
yeah.
Her name. You never said her name. You just said her.
So I'm sorry. I thought I said Jeanine Pirro, but she left such a sour taste in my mouth, and I see the stuff that she does on Fox. And I see her making up facts and kissing the president's butt and all the rest of it. And she's my big concern, and this goes to something deeper with me. I mean, it's just, I want to hear from you about a number of issues, but we have time. My biggest concern with DAs is that they don't have any ambitions beyond that. And because I don't want them to be DAs because they want to be a senator or they want to run for Congress or they want to be president. In fact, if I were king, which of course the world is grateful I'm not, if you became a DA and you could never run for elective office again.
Oh, and that's the one thing she did say. She's not a politician and she doesn't aspire to be a politician.
How many politicians have you heard say that?
well, I told her, and I did tell her. I said, with Janet DeFiore and now Scarpino, I said actually, the community, the black and brown community is very skeptical. They have said some of these things when they were, running for election, and the community got sold the bill of goods, and now the community is a little leery. You do understand that, right? And I did let her know that. We get you on the record and everything, and if you get in and you don't do the job, you do understand.
Yeah.
We will hold your feet to the fire.
Yeah. And as we should, and that's our job. And I need to be, I was so skeptical when I heard someone from TV, and I got calls from some liberal, centrist lawyers, not just people to the left, saying that she's immensely qualified. But again, my retort to them was, okay, then why is she on TV? I'm just so skeptical of that. Again, Janine Rose is, Janine Rose, please forgive me, Janine Rose, for comparing you to Janine Pirro. Janine Pirro has left such a sour taste in my mouth that when people ask me, and again, because I've had 2 different careers, they always ask me what the revelations of doing this were. And the first 2 things I come up with, it really is who you know in the world, sadly, number 1. And number 2, disappointments has been the behavior of DAs. So I'm just very disappointed in that. And probably third is the behavior of small police departments.
Absolutely.
In the poor areas, there's a lot of corruption. And in the richer areas, there's a different kind of corruption. A rich person's kid does something, you need to get 87 FOIL requests to find out about it. So it's just not fair. Anyway, I digress. A lot of things going on in your town. You're good for you. You will hold her feet to the fire, and we'll give her a fair hearing here as well. I wanted to move on. Last week we talked about it a little bit. Now we have the controller not paying bills for the new mayor, and now we hear the controller's in some sort of a pickle with the MTA. What do you know about these stories?
Well, again, we're still trying to figure out what's going on. I do know that several firefighters, police officers, DBW workers did not receive their overtime. There is at least 1 police officer that I know specifically that is owed over 100 hours in overtime and has not received them, and that person is very upset. And again, until I get a chance to physically talk to her, I will say, not to make any excuses or defend her, the article that Jonathan Bandler wrote about the excess and abuse of overtime, not to say that that's happening still or in these situations, but that there has been some documented gross abuses in overtime in the police department, to the point that there are several police officers who made more in overtime than what their salary is. So their salary is $90, they made $210.
Well, no, I thoroughly understand that. And she may well be, again, in this case, it almost appears to be on the face of it, she may well be a hero. The question is she supposed to be doing that? Is that her decision to make?
I don't know. And, and I look, and Damien has said this a few times too. I look at the poor leadership of the union presidents, because that is their job to make sure that, you know what I'm saying, that they represent their members, and they are not representing their members. They're blaming the payroll system. I think it's called Kronos. And I'm like, you know what? There are other municipalities that use this system and don't have a problem. So that means it's user error. It's not the system.
I see that. Well, we'll certainly find out. But again, the unions are going to come down in favor of their people getting paid, whether or not there was corruption. I don't trust.
Right. But they haven't done anything though. That's what I'm saying. Like, there's no pushback, and that bothers me. Like, why you pay dues? You pay dues to these unions, and when situations like that, they are supposed to step up. And when you have several members, they should be stepping up, and they're not. So I mean, I'm just giving a full picture, So I don't know what's going on. Again, I've been so busy, I have not.
No, I understand.
I've seen the controller. She gave me her card. She told me she would
You've actually seen her in person, and she gave you her card. You've had a sighting.
Yeah, well, one of the members of City Hall, their mother passed, and she lived like 3-4 houses after the funeral. I seen her come outside.
Oh, well, that's nice. That's cool. That she was there. I got another one for you. We did the story with the former, I guess, deputy chief who was accused of making racial comments, got his job back. Do we know, in this day of the Me Too movement and everything else, do we know why this guy got his job back?
A tale of two administrations.
Go ahead.
I mean, that's exactly it. I mean, there was some pushback when former Mayor Andre Wallace went after him and suspended suspended him.
Yes, he did.
And
it seemed rightly so.
And there was a lot of people saying that, that Andre Wallace was out of line for suspending him. I've heard portions of this tape, and, I really was disappointed when I heard some people say, "Oh, that's just locker room talk."
But in this day and age, locker room talk don't fly. If you're a
and in particular, it was a female who was, pro Sean Patterson and anti Andre Wallace, and I know I know she would be upset if that was her or about anybody in her family. There would be hell to pay for everybody. You understand what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, I know. I know that.
What
about the actual comments? One of the things I know that Councilwoman Duarte, there were things said about her, and a white firefighter or captain or some such title was called a cracker, which had it been reversed, the guy would never work again. And I'm not saying that he shouldn't. I tend to be a little less crazy about that stuff, but she's opening herself up for a lot of criticism, giving this guy his job back.
Well, then there's this whole thing with Andre Wallace actually tried to get him retired out because he's over 65.
I saw that.
And they're claiming that, and I have not seen writing in either direction, but they're claiming that for the fire department it's 70, not 65. So Andre Wallace cannot retire him out. The mayor could not retire him out. So he's got to be like somewhere around 67, 68, 69 or something like that. And so they brought him back now. I think if you're going to make a move, you got to stick to it. The problem is the tribalism in this city. So one time, Mayor Davis tried to undo what Mayor Clinton did. Mayor Richard Thomas tried to undo what Mayor Davis did. You understand what I'm saying?
So absolutely. But where they need to be consistent with these kinds of things, because it opens up all kinds of issues. And I don't know what's right. See, I tend to if somebody screws up like that, I don't have a problem giving them a second chance. If they apologize and say it was stupid. But in society today, no one gets second chances when it comes to racial comments or sexist comments. But this guy did.
I didn't see an apology, and I'm not saying he didn't. I haven't publicly.
No, but that's just me. But
I'm
separating it from the zeitgeist. The zeitgeist is, let's face it, if a white fireman had used the N-word, we wouldn't be seeing him anymore. At least I don't think we would. But
right, and if you're going to be that way, and I know a lot of people be surprised to hear me say this, if you're going to be that way, you have to be that way both sides.
Well, no, but of course you should. There's no question about it. But I also see for my dime. If I knew the person wasn't mean-spirited and wasn't a repeat offender, maybe you suspend them for 6 months or something and say, learn your lesson. That's unacceptable. I'm okay with that. I don't like to condemn people for life. But
I've heard from firefighters this is regular conversation for them. This was not, like, when this tape came out, there were so many people who were close to the situation who were not surprised. The things I did not hear about him, this was so out of character with him. Something must have led up to this comment because he doesn't normally talk like that.
Yeah.
This is not him. I heard none of that in defense of him.
Interesting stuff.
Which says a lot. I mean, because I can only go by, the people. I've met the guy. I've seen him once or twice at events. Of course, he's not going to talk like that at events.
No. Now, was he on the job when he did this? I mean, he wasn't home, was he, or anything like that?
No, he was on the job.
Yeah, because that's where. Yeah.
Now the problem with the recording, that again, the same person who defended him as locker room talk, they say it's an illegal recording. So that's like, I came into your studio, I set up my phone to record, and then I left. And then someone else came in and y'all had a conversation. And then I came back and got my phone.
Sticky wicket. That's true. And something needs to be said about that. But You said what you said, and that's the way the world is today. But
Right.
you know what? It reminds me of my corporate career. Everybody wants to play by the rules until it affects them. Conversely, everyone, if he'd been on the wrong end of those comments, his defense may not be saying those things. I don't know what the right answer is. It's just that this mayor now, the spotlight's on her to be consistent. That's all.
Absolutely. I don't know why she brought him back, but I know he's back, and I'm gonna be watching that situation. I'm sitting here. I'm very, I get accused for not giving people this so-called honeymoon period. I did not give Rich Thomas one because he was messing up before he even got in.
Uh-huh.
And I felt like things he was doing detrimental and needed to be called out right then and there. I'm really trying my best to not harp on every one of these situations.
Well,
right.
Yeah.
And give her this 90, 100-day window or whatever, but document everything and watch everything, and then before I start making some judgments, because I do know whenever you take over, this is a mayor position, period, is probably one of the hardest jobs. But in a city like Mount Vernon, which is so tribal in nature, and there's so much history of everything else going on, this has to be a difficult job for anybody who takes the job. So you have to give them a minute to get there.
No, I understand, but you're giving her a little bit. I think you've been very fair in your coverage. Listen, we got to run. Thank you very much for staying on these major stories, and we'll talk to you again soon, AJ.
Absolutely.
AJ Woodson, everybody.
Bryant. Yes.
Okay. We'll talk about that a little later. I'll probably bring you back on for that. Okay, a little later in the week. Thanks a lot. AJ Woodson, everybody, editor-in-chief of Black Westchester Magazine. We go next, and you heard it. We have another guest coming right on. As you know, we like to, we almost shotgun it. And we like it that way. This is Radio Westchester. I'm Bob Marrone. You're listening to Mornings with Bob Marrone. My next guest, in fact, I can't wait to ask him about something I spoke with George Latimer today. He is a very active, very vocal assemblyman here in Westchester. In fact, I dare say the most vocal. Please welcome Tom Abenante. Good morning, Assemblyman. How are you?
Good morning, Mr. Marrone. How are you doing?
Very well. Always a pleasure to have you. And, of course, I didn't my last guest because we had a number of hot stories in Mount Vernon, but I'm going to bring him back to talk about it. What was your reaction yesterday to the great basketball player's death?
Oh, that's really sad. It really is sad. It does show that we haven't solved all of the problems with technology in the transportation field. I'm reading constantly about accidents, and people want to get from one place to another. Helicopters, airplanes are a great invention. We've had them around for a long time, but we still haven't resolved all of the issues, and people are still dying, and it's really sad. Here was somebody, a young man who was a basketball great, but also had a lot of people look up to him, was an inspiration to a lot of people. And it's really sad. It really is sad.
Well, in defense of that industry, in the commercial realm, in the United States, okay, Europe almost as good, but the rest of the world, except for Israel and some carriers, not a lot of good things can be said. But in the commercial realm in this country, flying is safer than taking a bath. It's just the way it is. But on the private side, you just don't have the same rigor. Anyway, we didn't bring you on to talk airplanes, but we did want your reaction. Mr. Latimer was on today, whom you serve with and know well, and he was talking about they starting to see an uptick in statistics of those crashes into bridges, the King Street Bridge most notably. But one of the things he mentioned, and I know you've cared a lot about this, and we've had you on a lot about this topic, he talked about that the real silver bullet's going to be when GPS manufacturers finally put bridge height in there. What say you?
Well, I understand that, yes. That's it. I still don't think that's going to solve the problem. I mean, the governor has promoted this high-tech system, and I saw that George the other day put out a had a press conference and was saying they'd reduced the number from whatever it was.
That's the thing
to
I'm
8.
talking about.
And I'm looking at this and I'm saying, like, you're spending $1 million on this device and you still have 8 trucks hitting bridges. Yeah, it's not the total answer. And I agree that, if you have GPSs putting bridge heights on that, but still, a truck driver's driving along and they may not see the bridge height. I still believe the answer to this is a barrier across the highway that you've got signs that go across the highway. Why can't you put a sign in several places before the King Street Bridge and other bridges like that, right across the highway, with something hanging down, that rubber bar coming across that they use as entrances to parking lots and other places? Boston uses this, and other places use it.
When you
and
first
just say, bridge ahead, get off here.
When you first introduced that, goes all the way back to 2014. I was on WFAS then. I can mention them because all they do is dopey sports now. But and it made total sense to me. Why did the state not go for it?
It wasn't 2014. It was 2004, I believe, when I did it as a county legislator.
Oh, right. No, but I'm saying
permission to do it on the Bronx River.
When you mentioned it on my show, though, and it was back all those years ago, why doesn't the state listen? Because it made sense to me. The things that be dangling down, you can't help but bounce into them.
I don't know. I really don't know. They've made some argument. They're afraid that there would be a projectile produced if a truck hit it, which to me makes absolutely no sense. No sense at all.
That's like saying
I want to use it at the entranceways, and there the truck should be going rather slow, so even if they do hit it, and they're not going to knock it off. And even if the truck is going 60 miles an hour,
plus
you're
going to make it
about it being so. It doesn't even have to hit it.
No.
It could come down like 2 inches above the highest truck, just so it's right there in the driver's face so he sees and says, oh, my God, what's this coming up? And it'll slow him down even if he doesn't get off.
I got to give you credit for this one. Well, you keep pushing because I do like, not that no one cares what I like, but it seems to make sense, that proposal. Moving on, everybody's worried about the budget. Locals are, the county executive is, I'm sure you are. Where do you think?
We're having our first budget hearing today on the environment budget. Our staff has been working since the governor put the budget out to make some sense out of it. The problem we have is it's not like a budget that we had at the county board. When I was a county legislator, we used to complain about the form of the budget. But I will tell you it's far better than the form of the budget in the state. It was like a Manhattan phone book, and it was not a program budget, which we wanted. We wanted some analysis of how the budget affected the programs in the county. But at least it was, page by page, a change of last year's budget. So you could look and you could see Department of Public Works last year had 15 jobs in this area. This year it's got 14 jobs. And you could say, why did you get rid of one job? Was that a real job? Did somebody leave? Are we firing somebody?
You can't do that?
We cannot do that. What we get on the state level is a line-by-line change of law, and the budget is thick as, I'd say, what used to be a Manhattan phone.
That's obtuse.
Yes, it is. And therefore, our staff needs to get briefed by the governor's office, needs to go through it line by line. Fortunately, we've got some people who've been doing this for a while. They know where to look. They understand what these things mean, and they produce a book for us. And
does it show year by year where you could see all? I mean, I did budgets I didn't have billions, but I did $100 million budgets.
I am sure the governor has those spreadsheets, but we don't get them from the governor's office.
How can you not have those spreadsheets? It is.
I fully
you
agree
can't
with you.
do
That's
a budget
what our
without.
staff produces.
Hey, what would the governor do?
I agree with you. Our staff works their tails off. They sleep. They sleep in their offices on the floor. And they produce these documents for us, and so we will start to go through the budget today. We will have a Democratic majority conference later today, so we have to be in two places at once. We have to be at the environment budget hearing and then at a Democratic conference, and so I'm on the environment committee. I will be able to sit in on the budget hearing. We'll get a brief briefing from our staff as to the highlights of the environment budget before we go in and start asking questions. The chair, I know, spent a good part of the weekend getting briefed by the staff, the budget chair and the environment chair, and they will be asking the hard questions: as what's different? What are you doing differently? What are the policy differences? And do you have the money to continue doing what needs to get done? I mean, the governor is saying he's got a 2% arbitrary cap on spending. Now, that's the overall budget. So that means that there's going to be, that the Department of Environmental Conservation, the DEC, is really not going to get much of an increase because education and social services, Medicaid, which make up a big chunk of the state budget, always go up. There's always more people. We're producing more kids who have to get educated. We have more and more people who are becoming senior citizens who need help. We have more people with disabilities. And so those budgets are going up. They were always going up dramatically. And so that impacts the entire budget, doesn't leave much for these other departments. And year after year after year, you're getting into the Astorino syndrome. Rob Astorino said, no tax increase. Well, no tax increase meant that every year you had to do more with less. And you get to a point where you just, there's not much less left, and there's a lot more. And you just can't match the two. And I'm afraid we're getting there with the state.
Question.
So
Question on that. What would the governor do if someone like yourself, although you may not like one either, ever used the term, let's do a zero-based budget? How many people would pass out? How many would throw themselves off the Ware Mountain Bridge?
I think that's, I agree with you. That's the way to go. The problem is the format. We'd have to change the format of the budget.
You have to change the law, everything.
Yes. And it would, in effect, we ask those questions at our hearings, like, what are we doing here and why? But I don't think the problem is a lot of things being carried over that are useless. I think the problem is we're not meeting a lot of needs. This governor has been squeezing since he came in office. The zero-based budget concept, for your listeners, is that you start over every year.
Well, I do understand. Hey, listen, we got a couple of minutes left. What's on your mind you want to get out there?
Well, it is the budget at the moment, and in particular, I'm taking on the area of public of what's going on in the disabilities field. I will make an announcement. I did get a new chairmanship last couple of weeks ago. I don't know if I announced that. I am now the chairman of the Banks Committee of the Assembly. One of our members left, and there was a little bit of a rearrangement, and the chairman of the banks, Ken Zabrowski from Rockland, moved over to the very important Committee of Government Operations, and that opened up the Banking Committee.
Do you get to beat up on Wells Fargo and the other banks?
Yeah, I get to beat up on all
wonderful.
of the banks.
Good.
But I'm going to try to do some positive stuff and see if we can extract from the banks some positive improvements and see if we can help them become more efficient and better at, we've got some areas in the state that are so underserved. It's unbelievable. There are no financial institutions in some of our communities. And yet others, you've got one on every corner.
You made my day. You just made my day knowing that you get the banking committee. I come from that world. I kind of know where some of the bodies are buried, but their behavior in recent years, some of them, is just absolutely reprehensible.
Well, what has happened is a lot of them have fled to the federal system because there's less regulation.
Yes.
And so that leaves us with a lot smaller field of banks and other financial institutions. But it's a fascinating field. I've started to get into it. And it's an area where you've got credit unions, you've got all kinds of other financial institutions. It's not just banks, and you've got the online services now. You've got the questions of privacy and what they're doing with the data. We've got all kinds of issues that we've got.
And
the
then
Sony May
and the nonsense
it's
they
a very
do.
broad field.
The nonsense that they do with mortgages and loans and everything else. So you're going to have a field day. All righty then. We've got to run. Go knock 'em dead with the budget. Tom Abenante, Assemblyman from the heart of Westchester, represents our interests well. Thank you so very much, sir.
All right. We'll talk to you next week.
All right. Take care. In 1 minute, we're going to talk with one of our favorite guests. He is the managing editor and the publisher of Talk of the Sound, considered the source since 2008. As you might have guessed, we're going to talk a little bit about schools today, school security. We're also going to talk about a study that I just accidentally took off. But we'll get to that in just a moment. But first, we have to share the weather with you in the top of the hour sponsors. And the weather is brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses. And it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. It's already 40 degrees. Get up to 45 today. Mixture of sun and clouds. Tonight, partly cloudy, mostly clear with lows around 31. Now, tomorrow, a mixture of sun and clouds. You can expect that. It'll be breezy with winds out of the northwest, 10 to 20 miles an hour, getting up to 40 degrees. And tomorrow night, mainly clear and cold with lows around 26. Wednesday, mostly sunny skies. The high will be 39 degrees. Also supporting us this hour, Aging Issues Management, the law firm of Payne & Kahn, Plug-in Virtual Reality, and Dominic's Fine Cigars, where we will be broadcasting from live come Saturday as a prep for the Super Bowl. It is 9:05, and right on time we get to our next guest. He is our long-form interview, as he is most Mondays at this time at 9 o'clock. Please welcome the managing editor and publisher of Talk of the Sound, Bob Cox. Good morning, Robert.
Good morning. How are you?
Pretty well. You know, I've been starting this with each person today because a lot of people have reacted to it. And if you have anything to say or any reaction to what happened with Kobe Bryant yesterday, while I fix the camera on you, there he is, folks, the inimitable Bob Cox. All righty. What have you, any reactions to that?
No, not really.
Okay. All righty. Then let's get into the business of business. Topics. Green ribbon. What are you referring to as green ribbon? Is this the study, the study that you sent to me?
No, it actually hasn't really been made public yet.
Okay, so we'll talk about the guideposts.
No. I mean,
We'll do green ribbon
making
first.
it public now. I mean,
Yes.
there's gonna, I believe, be some announcement maybe at the end of the week, maybe a press release, maybe an announcement in the school newsletter. But as some folks know, I've been a long-time member of the New Rochelle School District's Health and Safety Committee.
Yes.
And one of the things that we've done on that committee is we've been involved in the oversight for the construction projects and various facility issues, rectifying a number of the problems that existed under the former facilities consulting firm Aramark. I mean,
yes.
They're still in the business. They're just not in the business of New Rochelle.
Not New Rochelle, right.
As some people will recall, I played a instrumental role in federal convictions for a couple of the people involved, including the former facilities manager who's still today sitting in federal prison in Pennsylvania as a result of taking bribes and kickbacks while he was running the school district's operations. So I've been part of trying to fix all that, and working with the people that were brought in after, which included Jeff White as the assistant superintendent, who's no longer there, Carl Thurnow and the team that he built. He's the facilities director, and we have this committee, which was run by two co-chairs, Melissa Passarelli, who's the principal at Webster Elementary School, and Chuck Strom, who's the city manager of New Rochelle. And in all the work that has been done to, improve things,
yes,
we have, in my view anyway, made ourselves a very plausible candidate for a Green Ribbon Award, and I'll explain what that is. Our committee actually began discussing this about 3 years ago, but we all agreed at the time we were not ready. We had not done enough of what had been planned, and a lot of the initiatives were not fully implemented. As that's no longer the case, as we sit here now, basically 5 years after the last building condition survey, and at the time the bond vote passed in May of 2016, and the money started to get spent. So now a lot of that has been done. More of it will be done over the course of this year. There's a bunch of summer projects happening. So, we were interested in looking at the idea of applying for this green ribbon. So I'll explain what that is. This is what I would first of all say is a real award. It's a really competitive award. It comes from the U.S. Department of Education. They select winners based on nominees from each state. Most every state participates. They don't have to, but most do. And each state develops its own methodology for how they're going to select who they nominate to the U.S. Department of Education. So we would apply to New York State facilities. They would evaluate our application and then all the other applications and make a decision. So the applications are due at the end of this year, probably November. The current application hasn't even been put out yet. It's going to be put out in about April. And then sometime in 2021, we'd find out, whether we were one of the selected nominees to go on to the Department of Education. So the way it works is that you have to pick a school, not a district. So the press release is going to announce the school that was selected. Let me not get ahead of that bit of information. We came up with a criteria of how to pick the school. We wanted to do one school because this is our first time and it's a lot of work. The application is very, very complex. And so we pick one school. And if a school has 40% or more reduced or free lunch students at the school, they have an extra slot among the nominees. So in other words, if there's one applicant, then it can be any school, but if it's more than one and up to five, one of them has to be a school that has 40% or more free or reduced lunch. In other words, less affluent kids. So we have a handful of schools that meet that criteria. We wanted a smaller school because easier for us to manage, so that ruled out some of the larger schools, and that led us to ultimately we wanted a building leadership that was excited about doing this. We found a school that fit those criteria. If people are concerned that their kid's school didn't get picked and why not, there's a good argument why we picked the school that we picked, but we can go do others, in the future years, right? So, any case, the application really requires its own committee. So the superintendent, Dr. Fajo, put together a committee in December, and it had its first meeting last week. And so the committee includes representatives from different departments. So you have to have nutrition components. So you have the food services director, activities portion. So you have the phys ed director, the medical director, curriculum director. You have somebody from finance, mostly about transportation. And then you have a team from the school. So that team was all put together. We had our first meeting last week, and we'll spend the rest of this year putting this application together with monthly meetings.
What are the things that changed over the 5 years that makes this school ready for being a candidate for the Green Ribbon?
Well, the number one change was regarding the facilities themselves, the physical buildings. They have been rehabbed in many cases. New drainage systems, which help with issues about stagnant water and mold, electrical systems, making the building safer, additional lighting, tearing up old fields and replacing them with new fields, new turf. there's been so many things that have been
Now,
facilities.
you have written extensively and even facilitated as a result change regarding access for the handicap, things of that nature, ceilings and stuff. That are those kinds of things?
No,
have they been
those are not
yet?
those are not part of the application.
Okay.
So it's going to be about what we've done with food, with medical, with curriculum. And curriculum is an area that we've done quite a bit about, incorporating concepts related to sustainability and health and nutrition into the
curriculum.
school curriculum. And a bunch of other initiatives that revolve around that. But like on the facilities side, I think one of the things that happened with Aramark is that we're using a whole bunch of illegal cleaning products. There's state laws about what you can and can't use, and these chemicals they were using were caustic.
Why would they use them? Were they cheaper or were they stupid?
I can't answer why they would do that. I just know that there was a lot of complaints about the use of these chemicals, not because people said, oh, they're illegal, but because they were so strong in some cases and smelled so bad that people noticed them. So why they use them, I don't know. Maybe they believed that somehow these chemicals clean better, right? Given the guy who was running it, there may have been bribes and kickbacks involved. I don't really know.
Who even knows?
I just know that they weren't allowed to use these things. So one of the main things that happened was getting rid of all those. I was actually there at the warehouse where they put all these things on pallets, put them on a truck, and drove them out of town. I actually made sure to follow the truck until it reached the New Rochelle border.
Is that right?
So they definitely were gone. Aramark also had a contract at Mount Vernon, so my guess is they're probably in Mount Vernon. But in any case, so we initiated this whole program of green cleaning, which included chemicals that were approved and on the list from New York State of green cleaning products, but also adding new air filtration systems and new equipment to clean the floors, HEPA filter vacuum systems, and a whole range of products that have all sorts of effects. I mean, one of the main ones is by having cleaner equipment, right? With HEPA filters and stuff like that, you get cleaner air in the buildings, and therefore for students or employees who have issues like asthma or emphysema or other medical problems related to breathing, this would help mitigate that stuff. So, you don't do this just for the sake of doing it. You do it because it has genuine benefits for the school community. And there's been so many of these initiatives over the past few years. And I will say, under the leadership of Jeff White, who's not here, and also under the leadership of Carl Thurnow, who still is, who's a brilliant world-class facilities manager that we have, and his team, which he has an excellent team under him as well, who come with their own very strong background. And so I hope folks, listening to this realize I have been for many years the harshest critic of the school district, and most of my criticism revolved around Aramark and the buildings and grounds crew. So the fact that they have actually turned this around is a big part.
It's a huge recognition on your part of them.
Yes, but more importantly, I think it sets the stage for us making a strong application. Now, you apply, it doesn't mean you're going to win, but the question that we had as a health and safety committee was, at what point do we feel that we would have a credible application?
But you do now.
And I think we do. And I think everybody agrees that we have a credible application. We don't control the outcome. Just like you run the race, you do the best you can. That's what we're going to do over the next year, is do the best job we can to complete this. This committee will do it. And so I'll be able to talk a little more about it if they, how they choose to announce all this. But at this point, our decisions as a health and safety committee have been made in public meetings, so I feel comfortable.
This is nice news. This is good news.
Yeah, well, I think look at it this way, and I think that most of the people involved look at it this way. The worst thing that can happen is that we're going to think really long and hard about how we can do a better job with our facilities, our curriculum, our medical, our food services, our physical activity towards some of the goals that are in the Green Ribbon program. The U.S. Department of Education states right up front their aim with this program is really aspirational. It's to get people to think, get districts to think about how they can do more of this stuff. And so we can't lose by doing all this work. We can only gain insight into what we can do better. But, we're going to do it in the context of an application and try to win the prize.
Take what bows you may, but this is about the process so that you won't feel embarrassed. But how much do you think it mattered that the press, in this specific case you, but that the press held them to account? It made a huge difference, didn't it? I mean, these are the kinds of things I want people to understand about why local press is so important.
Well,
would we be here?
Maybe it's not best for me to say that, but certainly.
No, but it is for me.
Well, I think it's safe to say that Aramark would probably, I was personally involved.
Yeah, I know you were.
More than that, Bob. I actually wrote the letter to Aramark that
okay. I did not know
the guy who went to prison to be removed from his position. Because the lawyer for the district refused to produce it, and the interim superintendent at the time didn't really know how to produce it. And I said, well, let's not let that stand in the way. I picked up the contract. I read it. I saw what the terms were. I wrote a letter to that effect. And they actually removed
But still, I remember your coverage at the time.
Well, yeah.
I mean, it does matter. Now, see, you can't say it, and I knew you were going to be like that. But I one of the concerns I've had, and I will pat this little radio station on the back. When we put it together, you were on our mind from the get-go, and we told you that. You made a difference. It matters. The local press matters. People need to support it. If you're going to advertise. Support your local press. And I made my speech. I'm done. My guest is Bob Cox, editor-in-chief of Talk of the Sound, who did the work on this and now later put his money where his mouth is, became a part of this committee that is now going for the Green Ribbon.
Well, now the committee has spun off this other committee.
Right.
So now we have the Green Ribbon Committee.
Yes.
It's not, just to be clear, and we discussed this at the meeting we had on Thursday. This is not like a normal committee that you might think of. It's not like the school board or the policy
it's a special.
committee.
It's an ad hoc almost.
No, that's not what I mean. What I mean is that the district-wide health and safety committee, the SAVE committee, which is security.
Oh, I see.
They are ongoing in perpetuity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you don't stop having these committees. They're state mandated. They meet every month. The health and safety committee was established in March of 2016. And, it's going to keep operating, as long as the law is on the books. This committee is just a task-oriented committee.
Okay.
The members of the committee have specific things that they have to do. Basically, the application is a whole series of questions, dozens of questions with subparts. And so the medical director or the food services director, transportation person, they have their discrete set of 4, 5, 6 questions they need to answer. Those will all be put together. Most of the questions are for facilities, and all of them relate to the building leadership, which is why getting buy-in from a building leadership team was so important, because really every aspect of all these dozens of questions refers back to the actual school itself. So they're a part of every single thing, but they're all discrete. But see, once they're done, once the medical director, the food services director, the phys ed director writes up their piece, they're finished. So, and then once we submit the application, the committee has performed its function. Now, if we want to do it again, we can do it again. But this is a committee with a very short-term, and I say short-term, from January to November, very short-term, narrowly focused a team. And it's really people from the Health and Safety Committee and people who run these various departments or their designees. But it's actually mostly the department heads.
Okay, I want to move on to another topic that you put on your list, school security. And I'm going to open up with just something that I read. I wanted your reaction to this, and then you can get into the details of your report. I was looking at a New Jersey paper the other day where my grandson goes. It was a story about his hockey thing, but I noticed something else. They wrote a piece, and this was a wonderful school district, a really nice school district in general. It's Lawrenceville, Lawrence, New Jersey. And they talked about their long-term SROs there was no political agitation about it. There was no concern about it. The way they dressed, the way they behaved, the students liked them. They felt safe with them. Now, I don't know enough about the issue to be pro or con, but why did that issue become such a powerful issue here in New Rochelle? Eastchester, they have them. They don't complain about them. Why was it such a powerful issue here?
Well, I'm reluctant to dive into that only because that's not actually why school security is on that list, and it's kind of a can of worms. And for those who've heard me talk about it before, to me, it's always been a bit of a red herring because it's not fundamental to what the security issues are in our school. But to answer your question, I mean, just to report what the arguments were. Some people felt that having an SRO was instrumental to having safety and a culture of safety in the schools, and having somebody on hand to respond immediately to incidents and all that kind of stuff. The people who were against it, and there was a series of meetings over the 2018-19 school year, was about the idea that the kids at the school would be afraid of the police. That they would feel intimidated, that a student might get arrested for something that would have been handled internally and therefore develop a criminal record. And they cited all sorts of examples around the country where, having SROs failed. And, that's kind of anecdotal. Okay. And there's also cases where SROs, made a difference. Really, we're talking about like active shooter response, stuff like that. But it certainly became highly politicized issue. At the end of the day, the board was really susceptible to that pressure. And I say that because every group, person, organization that they hired to study the issue, whether it's the Bryce Task Force or the Guidepost Solutions or Altiris, they all recommended SROs.
Yes.
Everybody recommended SROs. There wasn't anybody who didn't recommend SROs except the board's own ad hoc committee called Culture and Climate, which was basically stocked with a bunch of people from the beginning who didn't support SROs. I get it. Okay, so this is really a fact that the board leadership at the time did not want to have SROs, which by the way, just sort of point of order on this thing. Which they're, of course, that's their job to take a position on these things. But my gripe with what they did was they put the community through this unnecessary kabuki theater of having these meetings to be able to claim that they arrived at this conclusion through a thorough analysis of the facts, when in reality they had decided from the beginning that they weren't going to do it. And why? And I would say, so why stir up all the trouble? And I would tell you why, because I think that people saw a political advantage for themselves, including people on the board, that they thought that they could build support within the community and get votes to go on to future careers in politics. So they really put politics way out in front of school safety.
My gut is to agree with you. And my segue is, and in fact, I planned this before your comment earlier, there's a lot more to security than SROs. There's the condition of the doors and what we do with the security that's there. There's the condition of cameras, or the issue of cameras and everything else. What are your issues with school security today?
Well, so I will say that I'm starting off with looking at it from the perspective of a series of stories I've been doing, which has been going back and looking at what this district was told by the board leadership in the 2 years after the school violence in January 2018, starting with the press conference that followed the murder of Valerie Schwab.
The one over at the pizza place. That press conference, or was the one before that?
No, the one that was at City Hall.
Oh, the City Hall. Okay, yes.
You were there.
Yes.
And we heard from the principal of the high school, and we heard from the superintendent, both who are now gone. And many of the statements that they made were flat out lies. And if you go back and look in retrospect at that press conference, you can see that they were lies. That record has never been corrected. Statements that were put out about the stabbing of EJ, which we talked about the other day by Brian Stamps, number of lies put out by the district, never corrected. And then you can go on down the list. And then when you get into Jeffrey Hasty being the board president, it's just pretty much whenever he's talking, he's probably lying. And one example of that, it has to do with school security, because when they put out the initial security assessment that was done after the death of Valerie Schwab and the stabbing. It came from a company called Guidepost Solutions. And at the August 7th, 2018 board meeting, it was released in a highly redacted form to the public. Then at the end of the month, they were going, there was a presentation. Then they were and the board got the report. Then they were going to put out a redacted version at the next meeting, which was after Labor Day. That Labor Day weekend, Jeffrey Hastie provided a unredacted summary version of the report to the Journal News. And that reporter, Colleen Wilson, went through the unredacted version. Then on Tuesday night, September 4th, after Labor Day, the board released a redacted version. So she compared the two, and she found that a lot of the redactions were not legitimate redactions, in her opinion, which I concur with. They were actually statements that were in the report that were simply embarrassing to the school district, which is not something that's supposed to be redacted, because there's a legal standard for doing that. And so she argued that it wasn't applied, and Jeffrey Hastie is in the piece saying, well, if that's really true, we're going to take a look at it. He made some public statements to that effect as well. There is a Journal News story that says that a couple weeks later, they had gone through and unredacted sections of the redacted report. But I never saw a copy of it. And I don't read the Journal News every day. I wasn't even aware of the article until this weekend, looking back at it. But I went through all the board meetings from the date of the article, September 21st, 2018, until the end of the year. And I didn't see them posting any updated redacted version of the report that had eliminated some of the redactions. So I've gone back to the district and say, where is it? But of course that raises other questions too. If the same lawyer who did the redactions on the Guidepost report was doing the redactions on all the other reports for the past 30 years, how much of what got redacted were actually just criticisms of the school district, not legitimately redacted material? I foil a lot. I get a lot of redacted material. And I think it's safe to say, because I've also ultimately got unredacted versions of documents too through my sources, that the district has a history of hiding bad news by the way they redact reports. That got me into going back and looking at the report, like I've looked at other things like Apex, like the state of the...
What do they tell us versus the Guideposts recommendations?
Well, according to Colleen from LOHUD, a lot of what got left out was that they did interviews with students, staff, the police department, others who had criticisms of the district, and some of them were like that the kids don't respect authority, that the code of conduct is not uniformly applied. There was talk in there about racial tension after the murder of Valerie Schwab and the school violence that during that 8-day period. But it was aggregate, sort of summaries of what students say, security guards say, administrators say, teachers say, cops say, but nobody's name was in it.
So why redact it? Well, that's rhetorical.
Yeah. Well, that was her point. And so that's why she, wrote an article that included material that had been redacted. She left out other material that, could go to security issue. You don't want to know, for example, like how many security cameras are there at a school and where are they?
Right.
Because you don't want to reveal where there are blind spots. But I've told you on the air, you can walk around the building and see that a lot of these schools don't have security cameras and they have blind spots. And I've mentioned known ones at the high school, the security, the stairwells and the classrooms themselves. And the building is not fully covered, and a lot of these schools have literally nothing. And even if they did have cameras, there isn't anybody actually monitoring those cameras to see what's really happening. So, I put down there on my list the third thing, which I'll just dive into for a few seconds to kind of make a point. I wrote articles about the fact that the board president gave alcohol to teachers at Albert Leonard, and that also brought up the issue that the PTA at Albert Leonard and the high school were organizing, purchasing wine and hard alcohol to give as gifts and bringing them into the schools. And you asked me, like, well, okay, now that the legal opinion came out and it made it clear you can't do this, what's going to happen? Or like you said, it's resolved. But it isn't resolved because on Friday, the Davis PTA held an event at the Irish Benevolent Society as a fundraiser, which was actually a wine glass painting event that said the tagline was the effect of "Come for the wine, stay for the raffle," and they had a cash bar. So it's promoting alcohol, it's possessing, it's distributing, it's consuming.
How does this happen after this whole incident?
Well, you decide. I have to question whether they were ignorant of the whole discussion that's been going on
They have
for the past
to be
few
ignorant.
weeks.
I don't think they
Or
could be
it was
that
deliberate.
defiant.
No, it
To
was
defy?
deliberate. Or it was deliberate. Those are the two options. So you want to tell me that even though it went out in the newsletter and it was discussed widely and it was in the news and in social media where these people hang out, they weren't aware that there was an issue about alcohol. I mean, I don't find that plausible.
But bear with me. I have to, only for the sake of keeping my brain from exploding.
Okay, well,
because why would they do it, Robert?
Arrogance. We're special.
It
doesn't apply to us.
Put a finger in your eye.
We're the Davis PTA. We're special. I don't know, but some of the people that are involved in the Davis PTA are very upset at the insinuation or the statement, the flat-out statement by me that maybe they did it deliberately. Well, okay, let's set that aside.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, whether you did it deliberately or not, you did it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not allowed. I wrote an article that said the Davis PTA held an illegal fundraiser
Well,
with alcohol.
the school superintendent needs to put a memo out to remind them of the law? No?
Well, you've said that before, Bob. I mean, do you need a memo to know that you can't, shoot heroin in the middle of Bryant Park?
No.
Do you need a memo to know that you can't open carry a pistol through the Grand Central train station?
However, in this world of ours,
ignorance is not a defense.
No, I understand. Well, you know what though? But it wouldn't be the first person to say, this and this and this happened. Obviously, a strong reminder is required. And some statement, and this is what the executives' jobs are, to remind people of what they may be ignorant of or defiant of, and that it won't be tolerated.
I don't know. The board getting a legal opinion, putting it out to the press, putting it into the newsletter that goes to thousands of parents, including some of the parents that are involved in the Davis PTA. I mean, this was widely discussed on social media.
But what was their answer?
None of them were aware that this is an issue? No, their answer is that it doesn't apply to us.
That is their answer?
Yeah, they're saying that this is a PTA function that's not in the school.
Where was it conducted?
At the Irish Benevolent Society, downtown New Rochelle.
Okay.
But that's irrelevant because the law clearly states that it's on school grounds or it's on a school bus or it's on any school-sponsored or school-authorized event. The PTA events are all school-authorized. It's the Davis PTA. It's not the Mary Smith PTA. It's the Davis School PTA. It's an official thing that meets in the school district, that has members from the school district, that raises money and gives it to the school, all of which has to be accepted formally by the board. You can go, there's no...
Who's in charge of enforcing this law?
I would think the superintendent.
No, I mean, beyond that, the state. I mean, well, they're useless up at the state, but should they be enforcing it?
I mean, do I think like the New Rochelle police are going to show up at the Irish Benevolent Society and arrest everybody?
No, but I'm talking about the school, and I forget the name, the education committee or commission, whatever it is.
I mean,
I watched them turn their back on all these things that were going wrong in Ramapo. So this is probably like 18th on their list of things to not do anything about.
I mean, but you asked me a question, manager. I think at the end of the day, it falls to the superintendent.
Yes, it does. I do agree with that.
I mean, she, for example, if she was upset with the Davis PTA, she could disavow them or direct them to change their leadership or bar them from the school or not accept the money they raised or there's a lot of things she could do.
Or write the aforementioned memo.
My point, though, is that a lot of people were very upset about the reporting about the bottles of wine being given to the school and what the PTA was doing at the high school in Albert Leonard. Now the Davis PTA people are up in arms. They're on Facebook screaming and yelling and calling me names. Yeah.
You're used to that.
I understand that. But the point is, they didn't show the slightest interest in the fact that a student was raped at the high school. They didn't show the slightest interest in the academic fraud and that there's a second Apex report.
I'm going to that.
They didn't show the slightest interest in any of this stuff. So here we're going to talk about school security. Okay. And these people have nothing to say. All right. But what they want to scream and yell about is, why can't I have booze at my PTA event? And I'm the bad guy because I ruined Christmas. Now I'm ruining a good time on a Friday night for people. Okay. And a bunch of the comments I got back was, why don't you do real reporting about real stuff? This isn't a story. And my view is that it began as a story about the board president bringing alcohol into a school. Mm-hmm. It expanded because then it turned out that the high school PTA and Albert Leonard PTA were doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. And it's an organized public thing. It wasn't a secret. And now you have another story, which is really a follow-on story, and you know what that is as a reporter, which is, would this Davis PTA story get any attention if it would happen in isolation? Probably not. Mm-hmm. But the fact that we just had the board president, we just had the New Rochelle High School PTA, the Albert Leonard PTA, and then we had a legal opinion issued by the district and put out in the newsletter to thousands of people.
Their very own legal opinion.
The district got one.
I understand. Yeah.
So, of course, it is an issue, but I just find it ironic that, and then we can go into school security, that these people have nothing to say about the fact that this is the Davis PTA. Mm-hmm. Their school is totally unsafe in 100 different ways. Okay? And they have nothing to say about that. They're worried about that they can't have booze at a PTA event. That's their priority. It's not the safety of the students in the school.
Has this been raised to them?
I'm raising it now.
I know you are, but has it been raised?
But that's what disgusts me about some of these people, and it really does disgust me because they don't want to address the actual hard issues. So when some of the complaints that I got over the past couple of days was, well, why don't you write about serious stuff? I do. Okay, all the time. I'm telling you that your school, Davis PTA, and all the other PTAs, they're unsafe. Okay? They don't have enough security guards. They don't have enough security camera equipment. Nobody's looking at the cameras that they do have. They don't have exterior cameras. They're blind to what's happening outside the building. The doors are left open. They're not properly latched. They don't have alarms on the doors. Should I continue? The building is unsafe in 100 different ways. There has been reports in 2002, 2009, 2013, 2018, 2019 that all are saying the same thing over and over again.
Who generates those reports?
And these people don't care.
Who generates those reports?
The board requests them either because they put together committees or they have to follow state law, or they hire outside consultants. Bryce, Altiris, VRI.
Who's in charge?
Guidepost.
Right. Who's in charge? Because it's the Guidepost reports I was looking at last night. Who's in charge of implementing those changes?
Well, ultimately, the superintendent is in charge.
But at the next level? Does the principals?
The assistant superintendent for business would be in charge. Because technically security reports to them.
I wanted to inject a
and also
question.
Facilities reports to them.
I wanted to just go back to something, and then we'll get right back to security. My guest is Bob Cox.
By the way, perimeter fencing.
Yeah,
you can wander onto any of these campuses. Okay, 24/7.
I just want to go back to something.
Gates.
There's something that's missing here. We'll get into these issues in a moment. You mentioned Mr. White before.
Huh?
Now, as someone who reads you and who's followed this whole evolution, this guy seemed to be a very capable player.
Who?
Mr. White. He was a deputy. He was one of the deputy superintendents.
Yes, this is the superintendent for business.
Why was this guy gone? Do we know?
Sure, because he wouldn't do what Jeffrey Hasty wanted to, and Jeffrey Hasty only wanted people around him who would kowtow to him and let him do whatever he wants, which included a whole bunch of illegal things, like running his own investigations, going through employee emails. He had just admitted the other day that he was writing job descriptions, wandering in and out of the schools, interviewing positions.
Why was he? That's a superintendent's job, is it not? They're a board.
Well, according to him, it was necessary under the circumstances because the community, the greater good for the community required it, which is total baloney. Okay, he tried repeatedly to insert himself into the state investigation of Apex. I have the emails over, and they're telling him, we're not going to deal with you. Okay? And my concern is that what's happening under Dr. Fayou is that she's allowing the new board president, Amy Moselli, to do the same things. Okay? So I wrote the other day about the fact that there was this issue with the football coach where there was a meeting at the high school. late at night, and I wrote about how they tried to orchestrate a press conference, and that it kind of blew up in their face because the coaches that were at the meeting refused to come. So Faye, who ended up standing there by herself at the press conference. What I didn't really get into is Amy revealed, the board president revealed that she was present, and Dr. Fayou said at the press conference she was present. On what legal basis was a board member, including the board president, in Joe Starvaggi, the interim principal's office at the high school at 9 o'clock at night to discuss personnel matters? She has no legal right to be in the building at all unless the board votes to give her that authorization, which, since they didn't meet from when the incident occurred with the coach and the drunk girl to the meeting, which was same day, they never gave her that authorization. And if they're discussing personnel matters, which is like what to do about the coach, who's gonna take over for the coach, who's gonna coach the big, these are personnel matters. Why is she there? She's not allowed to be there. Okay, so the last couple of years have seen something that is a board out of control, and what we've had is superintendents who were basically just kowtowing to the board leadership, and the rest of the board sitting there twiddling their thumbs, watching this. And by the way, it's not like it all worked out great, right? I mean, the fact that the board wasn't seeing it to that the closed campus policy wasn't followed led to mayhem and murder and stabbings. The fact that they didn't follow their policy about having a committee put together to interview the superintendent candidates is now the basis for a lawsuit. They didn't follow the rules about alcohol and in the schools. And there's many, many others.
How much of this...
So that, by the way, so that's why it matters.
It does matter
that the district isn't following the law and their own policies. It's not just because of being.
Let's go down another level.
But it's not just being a stick in the mud. The fact is that these failures have blown up in their face over and over again, and so maybe there's a reason why these rules and laws are on the books.
Well, yes, but now we get into something else. How prepared are these board members to be on the board? For example, do they know that they should have voted for Maselli to be at that meeting? Does Maselli know that? Are they briefed on these laws? Is there a training program or an orientation for new board members? Do we know? I mean, certainly there should be.
Well, there's an orientation for board candidates from the Westchester Putnam School Board Association. The New York State School Board Association puts out a handbook. They offer training. When people are elected, they're offered training, and they typically go. So, yeah, there's all sorts of training available. But, I mean, you're being so kind to these people, Bob.
Not being kind. I'm trying to understand why they behave as they do.
I don't know. It seems like if you're elected to the school board, one of the things that you ought to do when you're elected is you ought to sit down and read the board policies.
Well, that's my point. But it should be mandatory.
Well,
you can't serve if
they're
you
elected
don't.
officials. I mean, look, if an elected official wants to take his girlfriend to London and pretend that he's taking his wife and skip a bunch of budget votes, I mean, the voters can decide that, right? And it's the same thing with school board members. Okay, if people don't like the fact that they're not following their own rules or not reading their own policies, they can vote them out. But listen, that's the problem. And it wouldn't really matter, okay, if the school board stayed in its lane. Okay, because what a school board should do is they should be asked to vote on recommendations of the superintendent. If they have questions, they can ask them. But otherwise, they should approve them. Okay, and the fact is, most of the things that come before the school board are perfunctory. That's why they have we just vote for 40 at a time. Okay, it's just about authorizing. There's very few as a percentage of the decisions that come before the board that even really warrant any real discussion. But that's what a board can do, is ask questions. But when board members are writing job descriptions, attending meetings to discuss personnel matters,
I don't disagree.
Inserting themselves into state investigations.
My point. I'm thinking in terms of solutions. One of the things my old management career taught me really well is that there needs to be consequences to these things. There need to be you need to have some sort of a requirement. If you're on the board, you need to take this test. I know you're elected, but you can't be approved to function on the board unless you've gone over these rules.
Can't do that.
Why not?
Because elected officials are entitled to be idiots. Okay. Maybe people should think a little bit harder about who they're electing.
Well, that's true. That's true, too. But
I mean, like I said, it wouldn't matter if they were all a bunch of idiots. And I'm not saying they all are a bunch of idiots, but it wouldn't matter if they were a bunch of idiots if they were staying in their lane where they're reviewing recommendations.
But that's my
they
point.
should not be at these schools interviewing job candidates.
But do they
sitting
know
in personnel meetings.
Do they know?
Sure, of course they know.
How do you know that?
Well, for example, when Jeffrey Hasty was interviewed the other day on another station, okay, he was asked about writing the job descriptions. Isn't that the superintendent's job? Yes, but in this circumstance, I had to do it.
Well, that's baloney.
Well, so he knew. Okay. Again, you don't know that schools are alcohol, drug-free, and tobacco-free zones. I mean, there are signs. Okay. So, of course, they know.
Why do you
care.
think this we have a new superintendent, and hopefully she'll get the memo. But why does this one, if indeed she does, the previous superintendent and perhaps others, why do they allow the board this kind of latitude? Why don't they put their foot down?
Why doesn't the superintendent put their foot down?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, the superintendent is the only person that serves directly at the pleasure of the board.
That's true.
So they could always terminate them if they want to. Now, they terminated Dr. Feo tomorrow because she was forcing them to follow the law. Yeah, they could remove her from office. They would have to pay her.
Pay her.
Okay. You'd have to not pay somebody by removing them for cause, and that's very complicated. Mostly you try to push them out and get them to resign. But look, you asked me about Jeff White. Okay. There was a bunch of people in 2017-2018 school year who were performing their function correctly. In other words, that they reported to the superintendent, not board members.
He was an impressive guy. I'm just saying.
Well, I'm just talking about
I know, in general.
Whether it's IT director, whether it's business official, whether it's just, the board has no role in speaking to anybody at all unless they're the board president, and then the board president speaks to the superintendent. Now, I don't mean to say like, hi, how's the weather? You know, what'd you do over the weekend kind of conversation. But to go in and talk directly and make demands of IT personnel, business office personnel, transportation personnel, people in the different schools, okay, that is not the role of a board member. And yet, with plenty of evidence, in fact, we have their own statements that show that this is what's been going on for the past 2 years. So, Osborne, basically was fired in June of 2018. So at that point, he no longer cared. So from July 1 until, the fall, he just kind of was checked out and he let people do whatever they wanted. Then they brought in Dr. Parvey, to run things. And it was pretty clear from the get-go that she was, not going to be a strong superintendent.
And interim.
And interim or not, okay, she was going to go along with this plan. In other words, the board, Hasty in particular, and Moseley would not have put Parvey into the job if they didn't think that she was going to kowtow to them. And there was other people who wouldn't kowtow to Hasty and Moseley because actually it's not legal for them to be doing what they were doing. And so someone like Jeff White, he wasn't willing to do that. He said, I report to the superintendent. So if you want to tell me something, you tell the superintendent and they tell me. There's no chain of command that says the board president or the board vice president comes into my office and talks to me. And various excuses were made. Hasty put out a bunch of phony stories. School board candidate last year, Peter Catone, repeated a bunch of these phony stories because he doesn't know what he's talking about either. And, we got rid of some talented people. And more to the point, and I've made this before, other talented people don't want to come here. Okay, so when Jeff White was fired, okay, there was a list of 26 people who were business officials who had the license that were available, either because they work as kind of floaters. There's some people who do that for a living. They go in and fill in all around the state. Other people who had been let go from someplace else, or whatever. But there was 26 of these people who were listed on the little sheet that the union keeps. There's a union for business officials. It's called ASBO, ASBO, Assistant Superintendent for Business Officials, or something like that, or Association of School Business Officials. There you go. So the 26 people were called. Not one of them was willing to take the job. Nobody wanted to work under Hasty.
But so how much of that do you think was because of all the events that took place?
It was because they got rid of Jeff White, and Jeff White was a respected person in the union, and they knew how he had been treated, and they wanted nothing to do with it. That's why they initially proposed hiring a guy out of New Jersey, who was actually put into a board resolution in December of 2018. And he was on there for about 4 hours. During that time, I went to research and see who he was. Turned out he had a horrible track record, and began asking questions about them. And I had prepared a whole document, and
excuse me.
I found out I wasn't alone among people who were questioning this choice. I won't get into why I'm saying that, but so I don't want to take full credit for this. But in a matter of 4 hours, the board realized we can't hire this person. Now, this was not one of the 26 available people. This is a person who was basically unhirable out of New Jersey. And so we were going to hire him, and then we didn't. And so what did we end up doing? We ended up hiring a guy who hadn't worked as a school business official in 11 years, and his previous job was in New Rochelle, and where he left under a bit of a cloud.
Well, why not? We've got about 6 minutes left, 6-7 minutes.
By the way, a lot of people who are defending Jeffrey and Peter Cantone and Denise Ward and others, they don't want to hear any of this. But this is the truth. The reality is that time and time again, we are not able to get people who want to come work here. And when we do get people, they're coming from some of the worst school districts in New York State, like East Ramapo, Newburgh, and New York City. They're not coming from the better school districts. There's a reason for that. Even Dr. Fayhu said at the last board meeting that she was putting out the job application for HR, Assistant Superintendent for HR, whatever the title is, because they didn't get enough quality applications. I can tell you why. Because people don't want to go work in a place that's a madhouse. And that's the reputation for employment that New Rochelle has. It is considered a place, and this is something that's been said to me, where careers go to die.
Oh.
So why would you want to come here? And can we never, ever overcome that? No, of course we cannot never, ever overcome it. But it's the reality of what we're dealing with now. And what we're dealing with is a reaction to the board members running the school district, and that's what needs to stop.
It's a runaway board.
Well, that's the term that's used. Yeah. That's the runaway board is actually the common currency of what people talk about.
I want to go someplace else, and we can do more security next week or even at another time. I was reading a story out of New York City this morning. I'm sure you've probably seen it. Carranza may well now, the superintendent there, be investigated by the federal government for grade fixing. You've reported about it here. You've reported about the Apex
I've
stuff.
also reported the fact that I've been told the feds are investigating grade fixing nationwide, including New Rochelle. And I've reported New Rochelle to the feds myself.
Okay. Why do they do this? I mean, for the sake of our listeners, why do they do this?
Well, the obvious reason is because they're judged based on the performance of the students, and therefore they want to juice the numbers. What's so hard to understand about that?
No, I know. I understand that, but I wanted I wanted to get it out there. Sometimes we ask a question we know the answer to. But let's peel back the onion a little bit. Are these schools ever, here in New Rochelle is where your expertise is, but are they ever going to address the real problems educating people, or are they just going to continue to try and fake the numbers? What is your observation? What can we hope for?
So start with this. Public schools don't get to pick their students.
Right.
So whoever shows up, that's what they're left to deal with. Then the public says, hey, take these kids, this, unselected, unfiltered group of kids. There's no application like an Iona Prep or Fordham.
Right.
They just walk in, and now you need to turn them into, A+ students that are perfectly disciplined students that don't do anything wrong, and this is kind of the expectation. So,
well, that's ridiculous. Of
okay,
course,
but that's
of
an
course.
expectation that the public has, okay, that they're responding to. So I don't ever hear anybody that's running a school district, and certainly not here, that says, listen, we're not getting a bunch of candidates for Harvard here. We're getting people that are, from Guatemala, from Mexico, that don't even speak English, that are filling up our schools. And so that's why our performance isn't very high.
But why
we
not?
have all these people that have uneducated moms, and they have fathers who either aren't in the picture or do not have, high-powered jobs. And that's why the base of the students that we have to deal with is low functioning, okay, on average. And, so you shouldn't expect them to function at a high level. They don't want to say that. So instead what they want to say is we're going to solve all these problems, which they can't solve. Okay. So, I'm going to take Dr. Feo as an example. She made a statement about, one of our goals, this was 2 weeks ago, one of our goals is about improving graduation rates. That shouldn't be a goal. Okay, just like I said about the green ribbon, our goal is not to win a green ribbon award because we don't make the decision who wins the award. That's what makes it a valid award. If we win it, we really won it.
Right.
Okay, but what we can do is say that we're going to compete as hard as we can. We're going to do the best that we can. But you'll never hear that from someone like Dr. Feo or her predecessors or from the board. It's always about, this is all going to work out. Everything's going to be great. The graduation rates are going to be high. The student discipline is going to be excellent. All the problems are going to go away. So they have to own that. I mean, so if the superintendent comes to the building leadership, especially at the high school, and says, our number one goal is to get the graduation rate to be really, really high, they're gonna deliver what she wants.
By one way or other.
Well, however they have to do it. So, to quote my friend Mark McLean, who likes to quote Malcolm X, by any means necessary, they're going to do that. And that doesn't mean if they have to fix the grades with Apex or fudge other things or, not count certain people that otherwise would have been part of a graduating class. There's many ways to manipulate the outcomes. And they can change all the time. They're constantly moving the goalposts as to what constitutes graduating. So they can play with all these numbers. And the reality is that the public, by and large, just wants to hear what they're hearing, which is we're taking it seriously. We're going to get the graduation rate. They're going to be really good. Oh, the numbers came out. They're really good. Blah, 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 blah. Nobody wants to dig underneath and say, is that a bunch of baloney?
But the federal government is now.
Well, I don't know what they're going to do. They're looking maybe at grade fixing. I don't know. They should be looking at not Apex as a company, but the way Apex is used. Because Apex can be used, obviously, to manipulate.
You can manipulate the numbers, sure, yeah.
Right. Here's what people should think about. If we know they were manipulating Apex and changing hundreds of grades, that means they're willing to cheat. So if they're willing to cheat with this Apex computer system, where else are they willing to cheat? There's a lot easier ways to cheat, right? Like you go to certain teachers and you say, listen, Billy is failing this class. We need him to pass. Pass him. And the teacher's like, okay. Now, some teachers say no to that, but they'll go to the next teacher. Who says that? A teacher, an administrator might come in and say, we want you to boost this kid's score to graduate.
They've got no right to do that.
But that happens all the time. Now, some teachers say no. Some teachers say yes. Okay, so I don't know. I mean, we don't know. All I know is that we know they were cheating with Apex, so it's reasonable to assume they were cheating with other things. It makes all of the graduation numbers suspect. It makes the diplomas themselves suspect. That's a major tragedy for our community that we're
and the children themselves
pushing kids out into the world who didn't really earn a diploma, because it's going to show up eventually when they go to work. Right? They won't be able to figure things out or do things.
Like when you go to a cash register and they can't figure out the change.
Well, it may be a simplistic version, but I think that there's a certain expectation about what it means to get a high school diploma. And if the kids didn't really earn it and they just, were pushed along.
Oh, it's going to show up.
It'll show up. And so, but these kids are being cheated out of a proper education because remember, under the law, they're entitled to a free and appropriate education. They're entitled to this education. And then when they're not getting it, they're being cheated. But individually, a parent or a student might say, "Wow, thank God I got my diploma, even though I have it on my wall now." But as a community, we suffer from that. But to circle back to the whole thing, because I see we're running out of time,
we'll add a couple.
I would just say that it makes me laugh when I see people in this community get really worked up about things like they can't have booze at a PTA event, or they can't give a bottle of wine to a teacher at the school, but they're silent about life and death issues that are occurring in the schools. They've got nothing to say. And so I guess I would sign off by saying to the Davis parents who are complaining, shouldn't you be more worried about the fact that your kid's school is unsafe?
We're going to spend a lot more time about that next week with Bob Cox about school safety. As you can see, he covers the schools here in New Rochelle better than any other news outlet, and that is Talk of the Sound, considered the source since 2008. The publisher and editor-in-chief, Bob Cox, thank you very, very much once again. Good job.
Thanks for having me.
All right, folks, we're going to wrap it up. Now, tomorrow is Tuesday, as you know. We'll have another lineup of important guests. But first, we want to thank our sponsors today. The United Hebrew of New Rochelle, the top-rated campus of senior care. Visit uhdc.com. Aging Issues Management and their partners, Aging Issues Radio. The law firm of Pena and Kahn. Plug-in virtual reality and Dominic's Fine Cigars. Dominic's Fine Cigars, licensed retailer with a big selection, including Ortega, Fuente, Padrones, and more. Dominic's Fine Cigars, located on Boston Post Road in Larchmont. And remember, Friday we will broadcast live from the smoke room at Dominic's Fine Cigars. And as for the rest of you, we will see you in the morning. For Bob Cox, myself, Vince Russo, George Latimer, AJ Woodson, Tom Abenante, Jake, and our callers this morning, Anthony, Tom from Pelham. Thank you for listening. We'll see you tomorrow.